kind of dog do you have?
Oh, she is a border collie and blue heeler.
Oh, nice.
She's just a puppy. I got her in May last
Oh,
year.
cool.
Yeah, so we went for a really cool walk today. I live in, if you know where Penticton is, it's like an hour south of Kelowna in like the interior of BC. I'm just south of there, so.
British Columbia is more on like the east coast, or no?
British Columbia is like west coast of Canada.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is Vancouver, British Columbia?
Yeah, that's BC. That's the capital of BC, I think. Or
Okay.
no, capital is Victoria. I'm an idiot.
Okay.
But that is in BC. Yeah. So welcome everyone to the Riser podcast. I have a very awesome and special guest today joining me, Ewok from MSK. He's been a longtime inspiration for me. We tried to do this interview yesterday, and my internet decided to totally crap out on me, and I was a little cheesed because I was so hyped, but we get to do it again, so I'm very excited. So that being said, welcome, Ewok.
Thanks.
How's it
going? Oh, it's going. Yeah, everything's cool. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So what kind of dog do you have, actually? Since you just asked me what kind of dog I have.
Yeah, I have he's a cockapoo. It was like a street dog that my wife found down the block from our house, and we just kind of adopted him. So he's been with us for about 2 years or so.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's over here eating some kind of nasty bone with some meat on it or something.
Nice.
Yeah.
So my first question is kind of a two-parter, but I just want to get a sense of your history, just as from like your childhood growing up. What was that like? What was your family like? Did you have rough childhood, good childhood? And then the other question about your history is just how you got into graph and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in kind of a like middle class, like kind of suburb of Milwaukee. It's called Glendale. I think we moved there when I was 2. Like, I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, but I have no memories of that. So yeah, like my earliest memories of just being a kid was in Wisconsin. And yeah, it was pretty good childhood. I don't have really any complaints. I kind of like just fell into art just the way that most kids do, where you draw stuff in preschool or daycare or whatever. But there was something just really fascinating about recreating images and stuff, and I just kind of went crazy with it, and like, I don't know if it's common or not, but it seems like there's some people that, they're like full grown adults and they still are trying to figure out what they want to do. But I kind of like always knew what I wanted to do. It was just a matter of what form it took. Like, I always wanted to be an artist of some kind. Even from like early on. There was a couple of other career paths. Like, I think I wanted to be a paleontologist and like study like dinosaur fossils and stuff when I was maybe like 5 or 6, or be an astronaut, or just all the typical like things that boys wanted to do for, like be a baseball star, play basketball or football or something like that. But art was always like either number 1 or number 2 amongst those other professions, and kind of just took over.
So like when you're like a little kid, like what age, like super young, like 5, 6, you would just be drawing all the time? Or
as far back as I can remember. Yeah, my mom said basically like I was drawing since I was, since I could hold a pencil, and she would always talk about how she could never keep any pens or pencils around because I would just hold them and bring them back to my room. So yeah, I remember like my parents were relatively strict, so I would have, I'd have like a bedtime 10 o'clock or whatever when I was in school. And I would wait for a little bit till I thought my parents fell asleep, like their room was right next to mine. And I'd put a towel under the door so they couldn't see the light on. And I would turn a lamp on like next to my bed, and I would just be drawing in my sketchbook till like 3 or 4 in the morning every night. And yeah, just weird shit like that. Like it felt normal to me at the time, but looking back on it's just kind of curious, like why I was that like into it, that I was like staying up all night doing it as like a 10-year-old or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. You had like this innate drive from early on that was just completely captivated by art.
Yeah.
And I understand that you have a daughter now. So is she into artwork? And
Yeah.
also, how did you pick the name Jupiter?
Huh?
So is she into artwork, and how did you pick the name Jupiter?
Yeah, my Jupiter is my youngest child. I have my oldest daughter. She's 19 and she lives with her mom in Minneapolis. But yeah, both of them are pretty artistic. My oldest daughter, Ginger, she does stuff with ceramics, and I know she's interested in like becoming a tattoo artist or something. And then my youngest, she's also very creative and artistic. She's kind of feeling her way through like what she wants to do. She also really likes ceramics, but she draws all the time. She paints. I've taken her out to like paint walls with me times, and she likes that. Just a little bit of everything. Like she's in 5th grade now, and then she's going to go back to her same school next year. And then after that, for like middle school, she wants to go to this Orange County Arts High School, which is pretty close to our house. So we have to start like trying to prepare for her portfolio and all that kind of stuff because it's like a limited admission, like they're pretty selective. So I'm trying to like coach her up to be prepared to hopefully get accepted.
That's awesome. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like you see a lot of parents that are super overbearing and kind of want to just push, you know, like they didn't make it in this certain way, but they're going to make their kid do that thing. And it's like, for me, the only thing that makes me want to have my kids do art or something is just I would have that in common with them. But I mean, if she decided she wanted to be a forensic accountant or something boring like that, like if that's what she enjoyed, I would support that just the same, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a really cool trait of you to have, to not force your kids to pursue something that they're not interested in.
Yeah, I mean,
not like that at all.
Yeah.
So a little bit about your graph history. Where did your name come from, and when did you start painting, and why did you start painting?
I'd seen graffiti, you know, just glimpses of it on, you know, this is all pre-internet because I'm pretty old, but like I remember as far back as when I was like maybe 5 or 6, maybe 7 years old, there was a show called Welcome Back, Kotter. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I haven't.
Okay. Well, actually, John Travolta was in that when he was like in his early 20s or whatever. It was this weird like 70s show about a teacher at some like public high school in the Bronx or something. And there was like a weird cast of, you know, students, like John Travolta was one of the students or whatever. But in the opening credits of that show, there was just a lot of B-roll footage from New York City at the time, like in the 70s. And one of the shots was a bunch of painted like subway cars, like on elevated tracks. And even as like a 5-year-old, I remember like, because we would watch the show all the time. It was like, you know, just kind of a dumb, funny, like whatever network TV show. But whenever I would hear the theme music from the TV show, I would always like pay attention because I would look for like when the subway cars came. I don't know what it was, but just anytime I saw graffiti throughout my life, it was appealing to me. Like I knew that that was something important. I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't know really anything about it. But when I would see it, it was just I was like magnetized to it. So, anyways, long story short, I started thinking I was doing graffiti like maybe junior or senior year of high school. I kind of got a late start just because where I grew up, there really wasn't like an established graffiti scene like there is in some of the first tier cities like New York, LA, Chicago, Boston, like places like that that had at least, you know, maybe 10 years of graffiti. I mean, New York obviously goes back further, but like it didn't really start saturating into like Milwaukee until around that time when I was in high school. And it was very like, it wasn't something that was just everywhere. Like you had to kind of know where to go to find it. So that's kind of when I started like actually being able to see graffiti in my hometown, you know, for the first time. And me and some of my friends that I used to skateboard with, like one of my good friends that I'm still close with today, Ember from HM Crew. We used to skateboard all the time. Like that's how we kind of became friends, through skateboarding in high school. And him and my other friend Ed, they went away to, I think they worked at some summer camp in upstate New York for like one summer. And when they came back, they were all like, they knew a bunch of stuff about graffiti. They knew about like pilot markers and like Magnum 44 markers and stuff like that. And this was like right when like baggy jeans first got big. And so like we were kind of just like regular skateboarders. And then when they came back, they had all these elements of like graffiti writer style. Like they were all in like Air Maxes and stuff. And I just kind of accepted that that was what it was supposed to be, you know? So we kept like just trying to learn as much as we could, but you know, this was all pre-internet. So you had to kind of just find, you know, and it was even before like camera phones and stuff, where like you didn't even really take pictures of graffiti because we weren't carrying around cameras and stuff like that. So you kind of had to actually go and like find places and just like look at it and try and like make a mental snapshot of it. But yeah, there was a couple of places on the east side of Milwaukee, like some alleys behind this restaurant called Beans and Barley that had a bunch of graffiti. And there's a couple of like sort of abandoned buildings that you could see from one of the major like streets that, you know, like people would paint there at night or whatever. So that's when we really started, you know, kind of fiending for graffiti. We started getting the itch, and we would learn just like weird little things like about how you could make fat caps out of like regular stock tips, but you had to like heat up like a needle and put it in the hole to make it wider. And then none of it ever really worked very well. Like it would always end up just spitting out some weird shaped line, but everything was just kind of like discovering the wheel back then because it was all just uncharted territory for us. So yeah, I kind of started dabbling with it and trying to draw in the style of graffiti. I mean, I wouldn't say I really even had the slightest clue what I was doing until maybe like a year or two later when I moved away to college, and I ended up going to Minneapolis, like Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I think that's when I can kind of say like I officially started. Like I had sort of a vague idea of what graffiti was and what my role in it was going to be back when I lived in Milwaukee, but I would say probably like around 91-ish is when I started, 91, 92, something like that, when I moved away to school. And that was kind of coincidentally when the graffiti scene there was really starting to take off. And so I was able to sort of learn in real time just by watching the people there that were, you know, a few steps ahead of us. But yeah, that's kind of like my origin story or whatever. What was the other part of the question?
It was just how you got your name.
This is a story I've told a bunch of times, and I really hate it because it's such a dumb story.
Okay.
And I'm sort of like cursed with this dumb name. But basically what it was is my friend Ember, I think we were going to First Avenue, which is like the club from the movie Purple Rain when Prince was performing at. That's like the big music venue in Minneapolis. I think we had gone to see some show, and it was the middle of winter. We were going back to our house, and I think we were waiting for the bus. And it was so cold, and this was the era where everything was baggy, like baggy, pants, and the whole like hip hop fashion was super baggy. So Ember had this big brown like Carhartt work coat, but it was like a triple extra large for no reason. So it was super huge, and it was kind of it was like one of those like, it wasn't like a waist length coat. It kind of came down like mid thigh or whatever, but because he got it oversized, it was like below his knees, and it had a big hood with like the fake fur around the edge. And so when we were waiting for the bus, he was kind of crouched over like this, and the hood was like over his face, and just like the width versus the height of like the whole thing, like I was just like, oh, you look like an Ewok. And as soon as I said Ewok, it was like during the phase of my graffiti where I would change my name all the time. Like I would come up with a new name every week or whatever. So I was actively thinking about words and letters and stuff like that. And I remember when I said, oh, you look like an Ewok. And it was almost like I saw the letters just like spell out in my mind. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool word. Like I'd like, like starting with an E and ending with a K. And I'll figure out what to do with the O and the W in between like later. But yeah, that was the extent of it. And so I just, I basically stuck with that for whatever reason. And yeah, I really hate that origin story because it's a dumb word because it's like a, third tier character from the Star Wars universe. And they're just like little cuddly, like weird teddy bear things. And, being in a crew with people with names like Saber, Revoke, Push, stuff like that. And then it's like Ewok, it's little like cuddly, like make-believe animal. It just seems so stupid to have been writing this dumb word for like 30 years or whatever. But that's what it is.
Man, I think that's hilarious. I don't think you should have any shame for that name or anything. I think is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like if I think about it too much, it makes me feel weird about it, but it kind of just words are just a collection of letters and sounds and stuff. So it sort of takes on its own meaning to some degree. But, for normies and people in general, like that's their first connection to that word.
Yeah, man, that's really funny. I definitely relate to what you said about just being magnetized and like just so captivated by graffiti early on. Like when I was driving to hockey all the time in Toronto, my eyes were just like glued out the window, like scoping out like all these highway spots and like, oh shit, that's fucking dope. I want to do that. And so like at like that early age, like were you going like when you said like there's like that building along like the highway, were you thinking like, oh, like you're trying to like make an impression or like doing it for like the fame or like attention, or was it just purely out of like an act of like, I like to paint and I'm gonna steal a bunch of stuff? I don't know if were you into like racking at all?
I wasn't heavy into it, but I dibbled and dabbled with it where I could, but I was always so paranoid, especially like growing up in the Midwest where, like minorities stand out more, like the dominant culture is like white people. So it was never like I felt super comfortable just like going into a hardware store and walking out with paint. And like if we were going to acquire it, or at least if I was going to acquire it, I would have to like come up with a little more kind of finessey ways of getting it or whatever. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times too, it would just be like, I think the hustle most people did was just, you would get some kind of, this is a little further along, but you would luck into maybe getting a paid gig or something like that. Or even if it wasn't a paid gig, you would at least just kind of inflate, your supplies costs or whatever, so you could buy a bunch of extra paint to use just for your own work, outside of whatever job you were doing. So I kind of survived on that for a while. One of my friends, this other guy from my crew, the Rights Value, I remember me and Ember, this was like probably the first year that we knew him, we were hanging out, and we were just like in college and broke, and he lived at his dad's house, but he had a car, like we didn't have cars at the time, so we would always like paint with him and stuff. And we stumbled upon some hardware store like right between, like, there's a street called Midway, or it's an area actually called Midway. It's like halfway between Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I believe the name of the place was called like Bolt Paint or something like that, or Bolt Hardware. And they had a basement, and we had gone there just for, I think we were looking for paint actually, and we asked them, they had like a display, but there was like no paint on it. We asked them, did they have any paint? And they're like, no, we're pretty much out. And then the wife is like, oh, well, what about the old stuff from that's in the basement? And they're like, oh yeah, I don't know if it even works anymore, but you're welcome to take a look at it. So the guy took us downstairs, and he just had like probably 300 or 400 cans of like vintage Krylon, and we were just like salivating at this point. At that time, I think it was just me and Ember that were there, and whatever little money we had on us, I think they sold them to us for super cheap. It was like maybe $1 or $2 a can, and so we like quickly scrambled to like get all of our money together. We went back, I think the next day, or it might have even been later that day, and we're like, our friend with the car, we're like, yo, like we have to go right now. And at the time, I think he had like pneumonia or something, was like bedridden, could barely like stay conscious. And he was like, oh, I'm sick. And I'm like, we're like, dude, you don't understand. Like, we have to go right now and get this. I mean, nobody knew about it, so it wasn't that urgent, but we were just so excited to get our hands on this paint. So we went back there and like cleaned out all that paint and got like, I don't know, it was at least like 200 cans. I can't remember.
I like the fact that the owners of the store are just like not concerned or questioning, just selling a bunch of young kids a ton of spray paint for $1.
I mean that. Just looking at it as like, this is something we can't really sell, and we're just clearing out space in our storage area or whatever.
Yeah. Clearly just supporting the young vandals, but
I think at that period too, like graffiti was not on people's radar like it would be, like years later.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I mean, I don't think they really even questioned what we were doing with it. So
big deck painting project, kids? Like
yeah, we would always get that like when we would be at like Home Depot or something getting paint, and sometimes like a worker would kind of see like 2 or 3 like early 20s dudes like loading up a bunch of cans into like their shopping cart, and be like, oh, what are you guys painting? Like they're kind of like sort of like confronting us about like why were we getting so much spray paint. And it got to the point where I'd just be so annoyed every time somebody would ask that, because it was like the implication that we were going to be doing vandalism, which we were, but it was none of their business, So I would always like, we'd be sitting there with a cart full of like 50 cans of paint, and I'd just be like, oh, we're painting our bikes. And the people would just be like they couldn't wrap their mind around it or whatever, and then we just walk off.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So on the last podcast I watched, you mentioned that there was like this train yard in your college, and you would paint there, and it was good for a while. You got to paint for 8s, and cops would watch you, no problem. And then one day, the tides changed, and you got busted.
Yeah.
So, did you keep on painting after that in like that same yard, or did you like?
It wasn't a yard. It was like it was like 1 or 2 parallel tracks that just went for like 30 blocks, and so there was a bunch of bridges. It wasn't like a proper like train yard, but yeah, we would still paint there. It just went from kind of getting the like pass where like nobody cared, and then it slowly drifted into like, okay, this is like something we got to be kind of on our toes about. But yeah, but at that point too, I think part of the reason why that spot got hot as far as like the police were concerned was that when the scene kind of started blowing up, most of the graffiti was concentrated there. But as more and more kids were getting into it and painting more and more, like kind of started off with a core of maybe like 20 or 25 people that were painting there regularly. And as it kept going, everybody was painting more and more, and also more kids were seeing that stuff. So they started painting. And eventually it got to the point where like most of those walls were painted, and it started bleeding out onto like the street level above, and kids were hitting like freeways and stuff, because it was like Minneapolis wasn't one of those places where graffiti had really existed to any large degree prior to then. So as everybody was kind of coming up and like learning, we would see the stuff that was happening in the Bay Area or like in New York or Boston, Chicago, stuff like that. And so we were trying to like be legit, like we wanted to get on that level, or at least get the respect that like Minneapolis writers like were, good or whatever. So that like that kind of pushed people to start painting everywhere, like not just on the tracks. And I think because it started bleeding over onto like the backs of the businesses and stuff up on the street level, that's when they were getting a lot more complaints and stuff. And then that's when the cops started cracking down. Whereas like nobody really cared when it was down on the tracks, because it was just sort of a no man's land. But
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
yeah.
So Minneapolis, or if that's even how you pronounce it,
Yeah.
does it get cold there? I imagine that you get winter. So
Yeah, it
I don't
gets
know.
cold. I mean, I
Have
don't
you
know
ever
what.
battled the frost while painting? I remember when I was painting, like one of the first times I went out, we like stole a bunch, like a cart full of spray paint from Home Depot, and we like walked along these tracks. It's like -17 out, freezing cold. I'm doing like my shitty god awful piece. My friend just like gives up. He's like, I can't paint in this shit. I'm like, we're staying. I'm finishing this.
Yeah.
It was just brutal. Like you have to want it so much more when it's just you're freezing your tail off,
Yeah. No, I can remember quite a few missions like that. One of my roommates, this guy, he was originally from Boston, and he was like a lot better than pretty much everybody at that point, because Boston had a scene and he was kind of active for several years prior to like when we started. But I remember one time we went to paint these trains in the middle of winter, and I think mine were all horrible. He painted like 3 or 4 trains, and when we got back home, he's like, oh man, I think my hand is like frostbit, and it's like finger turned black and blue or something for a couple days, and the skin all peeled off. But it eventually came. It wasn't like, like permanent damage or anything, but he was kind of messed up for like a week or two at least. But yeah, those winter missions really suck, because you like halfway through it, you're just like, what am I even doing out here? Like, it's not fun at all. It's just painful, and the results of what you're painting also looks really bad because the paint doesn't function properly.
Yeah,
So,
cans are clogging. You're like, should I be in an insane asylum right now? Like, no one
yeah,
else out here.
yeah. I don't miss that at all.
Yeah, I guess you're in LA now with just the warm, sunny palm trees.
Yeah, it's not. It's an upgrade for sure as far as that's concerned.
So now is the Joe Rogan questions. Feel free to just pass if you don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
So the first one is just if you've ever smoked weed or tried weed. You don't strike me as a huge stoner, but I know like 99% of graffiti artists are like potheads almost. So
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't consider myself like a stoner. Like I obviously have. I've been more into like the vape thing, but I'm not like a connoisseur or anything. Like I don't know all the different strains and stuff. It's more or less just like if I'm in the studio for like 4 or 5 hours, like sometimes it's easier for me to get focused if I take like a few puffs off of vape. But yeah, I'm not like a big weed head. I've done edibles a bunch of times, and it like each time got exponentially more horrific to the point where it was like, sometimes I'm like worried I'm gonna die and stuff.
Yeah. No,
I'm not a fan of edible weed, but
the last time I did edibles, I just like scraped like 2 years of keef out of my grinder and like chucked it in decarb and like put on a graham cracker or toast and like ate it. And like an hour later, like I'm just like, oh my God, the people upstairs, they know that I've just hacked into the matrix. Cause I'm feeling like just looking at my computer and like my phone, I'm just feeling how evil technology is. And I'm just like feeling like we're just going to be controlled by like AI and tech, like so much, like we're doomed right now.
yeah. Yeah, no, your mind definitely goes in some weird directions. But like the worst part about for edibles for me was like I get this feeling like, if you do like a bunch of, I mean, not that I do it regularly, but like when you're a little kid and you do a bunch of like somersaults or flips, and when you stop abruptly, it still feels like your brain is like kind of tumbling.
Yeah.
And I would get this feeling where like it's like this kind of dizzy, like tumbling feeling where it's sort of going in these choppy like steps. And yeah, it's just miserable. And not only that, but like you have no idea how long it's gonna last. And it seems like it's gonna just last forever. And also like your perception of time gets really weird where like 5 minutes seems like 3 hours sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's like pure torture. So I don't think I ever really want to do edibles again.
Yeah, no, I think I'm sure a lot of people can relate. I mean, it's just get in a big dose, it can take you to some weird places for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
The next question, I mean, I heard that on the last podcast you did that you haven't tried DMT. I mean, I'm not going to openly recommend it, but I'll tell you my experiences with it. Like you really understand like how it's like why it's called the spirit molecule. Like my first time with it, I was like really like anxious about like the ego death aspect of it, because normally with psychedelics you're like have to go through like a lot of like pain in order to see this like the light. But luckily it like wasn't that bad at all. I mean, maybe it was just like I wasn't like I was more prepared or whatever for my past experiences, but it wasn't bad. And then it really just like connected me with like my spirit. I was listening to like this really beautiful song and just like cuddling with my dog, and it was just like super, super beautiful. And then another time I did it, it just like totally opened up my mind, and like visually being able to like go through like all these doors of perception. It was super rad. So I think you'd have a good time and a good experience if you tried it.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely open to it. I just haven't had the right place and the right time to experience it. Like, I've done shrooms a couple times, and the funniest like takeaway from that, in addition to all the just kind of profound, life-changing, like spiritual whatever connection to life and the universe and stuff, is just being excited about like trying to explain it to somebody once you come back to reality, and realizing like as you're telling them about it, you sound like all those weird like hippies that like you kind of just rolled your eyes at you like before you had tried this stuff, because there's like really no way to like convey those experiences or those feelings without just sounding like some like crystal-y hippie weirdo kind of. But it's all true, like I remember hearing people saying these same things that I'm trying to explain to somebody else. I'm just like, oh man, this sounds so ridiculous, but it's like so legit at the same time. You know, like having
Yeah.
really profound, like beautiful experiences that like kind of connect you to, you know, like I don't know, you feel like connected to. I'm not into like religion, or I don't necessarily. I'm not an atheist per se, but I'm more of like just an agnostic on that level. But I definitely felt like closer to something approximating. I wouldn't say God because that implies, you know, like this being, but just an energy, like of, you know, like what it means to be alive and the miracle of like, you know, the allotted time you have on this earth. Like, yeah, it's just it was a really profound experience, and I think most people would probably benefit from you know at least trying it once or twice. You know.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's quite spiritual and profound. I've seen like just ridiculous artwork that was like a gallery from like God that you just like could never paint in like 1,000 years if you tried.
Yeah.
Like, then just like I guess like a week ago or over a week ago, I just was nibbling on them, and I was just like so clearly able to visualize graffiti, and it just like made things like so much like just enhanced my graffiti art and like geometry skills like by like so much just by like doing a little nibble. I think like yeah, they're just very magical, and it's just crazy.
Yeah, I've never really been able to like focus it in a way to like produce creatively. Like I was kind of just you know taking it in, you know, the first couple times or whatever. But I'd kind of like to experiment with like trying to, you know, paint or draw or something while I'm under that influence, just to see where it goes, because you definitely are seeing things from like a different perspective. I think like one of the ways I tried to describe it to other people was like in your regular sober reality, your perspective is kind of clouded by whatever's going on. You know, like if you're struggling to like pay your bills, like that kind of is like this cloud that uh sort of taints your vision of things, where like you're sort of running everything through the filter of like your existence. Whereas when you're on shrooms, like you're kind of seeing everything without any of your ego or any of your issues or problems. You can kind of see everything a little. It's almost like you're an alien visiting this place for the first time, seeing it with like fresh eyes, and you get like a definite, like different perspective on everything, as opposed to just like looking at it through your kind of, you know, your ego or your cynicism about certain things. Like a lot of that's kind of like pushed aside, where you can kind of just appreciate things in a much like more deep way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's just really crazy how much they can shift your perception. I feel like it would be difficult for me anyways, like if I was doing a regular dose on like 3.5 grams, just like my like go-to dose.
Okay,
Because
that's kind
you
of a
know, like,
lot, isn't it?
oh yeah, no, I don't really do that anymore. Because
Okay.
that just like totally changes your world, but in an amazing way.
Yeah.
Um, Beyond that, I've tried 4, and it's just like, okay, things are getting a little too weird now. But 3.5 is like right on the money.
Okay.
But I did it at the beach in Squamish about like a year ago, and I was just like listening to chill music. But like, it was just like really like an intense like meditation moment. You have to like just focus on your breathing, because it's like your thoughts are almost trying to like destroy you in a way, and you just have to like
Wow.
focus. But
Yeah.
like, it's like weird. It's like you're getting like this fucking force that's like coming down and like pushing in all this pressure, and then like once you get past like this hurdle, it's like boom, and it just like explodes outwards. And like
Wow.
when that happens, it's like holy fuck, like I'm like my brain just like lit up, like going like a million miles an hour, like uh,
Yeah.
it's like you're just so aware and you feel like so refreshed and alive. It's just really cool. So those are just like some views on mushrooms. I'm sure we could talk for like 9 hours about that.
Yeah, that's like a whole separate podcast.
Yeah, back to the graffiti podcast. No more Joe Rogan. Oh wait,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you've ever tried sensory deprivation tanks or.
Yeah. Me and my wife did it a bunch this past summer. I'd done it like one other time when I was in college, but yeah, I got into it. It's very cool. Like, do you do them?
I've never done it.
Yeah, no, they're pretty neat. Like, I wouldn't say it's necessarily comparable to like shrooms or anything like that, but you can kind of get into like a weird meditative state where you sort of, it's almost like it's like this place in between being conscious and being asleep, or being conscious and dreaming, like, and your mind will just kind of wander. Like for the first, like if you're doing it for the first time, you're going to be kind of acutely aware, like, okay, I'm in this dark little tank, and it's like, it's just weird being alone with your thoughts and having no like distractions or whatever. But once you kind of settle in and just relax, it's like, yeah, it's strange, but it's very refreshing. Like, I think it just gives your mind a little time to relax, like.
Yeah, that's weird. Like it takes away your connection to your body. So do you feel like you're just floating in your mind? It's like this weird sensation that
You feel like you're like a brain just like in space, like in outer space. Like you don't really feel your body. Like you can kind of always come back to like being connected to like, okay, I'm in this little tank or whatever. But sometimes it's like you're almost falling into like a waking dream state where your mind just goes where it goes. And I would try it, like we did it. We had like a monthly pass where we could go. I don't know if it was unlimited, but like the guy that worked there was cool, and he would like, I think my wife had an unlimited pass, and he would let me and her daughter go like on just her one pass or whatever. And so we would just go all the time. And it would get to the point where I would like, if there was something I was thinking about with my artwork or something like that, I would kind of push my thoughts in that direction while I was in the tank, just to see if I could kind of break through or like figure something out. I mean, it's not, you don't get super tangible results, but it definitely feels like you kind of clear your mind a little bit, and it helps you just be in a better state, like by the time you come out.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'd like to try it someday.
Yeah, it's definitely worthwhile. Like you'd probably like it.
Sweet. Let me ask you about your inspirations in life. Who would you say are some of your biggest inspirations?
As far as like other graffiti writers, or just in general?
No, just anyone.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of my early inspirations were people in my crew. Like some of my biggest inspirations, besides like my friends and stuff in Minneapolis, was like people like that were really killing it in the 90s from AWR, like Eclipse, Tyke, Bless, Crush, like the Saber, GK, people like that, Fable, like all those guys that were just killing it in like the, early to mid 90s. They had like a very profound impact on my graffiti, as well as people like Reese from AOK from New York, Todd James, the artist Todd James. His stuff was really unique. Like I really liked his approach because he kind of straddled like that subway art, spray can art era from like 80s New York. But he was also bringing a lot of like really creative ideas to it that were sort of outside of that language of just shapes and things. Like he did strange, like kind of off the beaten path type of styles. So I really geeked out on that stuff. And I liked a lot of the lot of the European graffiti because it was just markedly different than the stuff that was happening in like New York and the Bay Area. But I think one of the advantages of coming up in the Midwest and, you know, specifically in Minneapolis was because we didn't have an established style. Like there was back then before the internet, there was kind of regional styles where the prominent people from each of these places, particularly the ones that you know, slightly smaller cities like Chicago or Boston or whatever, they would kind of influence everybody in that local scene. And because the only real influences you would get with graffiti back then was like from graffiti magazines, or maybe you would find like a graffiti video here and there. And people would like trade flicks through the mail and stuff like that. But it wasn't like you could just scroll on your phone for 4 hours and fill up your brain with ideas. So it was like, this was like a subculture that you really had to be tapped into to like even have access to the inspiration. But what I was saying was like one of the biggest, I think, advantages of being in a city like Minneapolis that didn't have an established style was we were kind of creating that style. And I think because we were drawing from influences all over the country and from everywhere that we could get it, it was just like this amalgamation of different ideas, you know, like it seemed like the bigger cities kind of had established styles. So you could see like a Philly writer and tell that they were from Philly, or like a New York writer. Even like within the boroughs, they had like within New York, they had specific styles that were kind of from like Bronx or, you know, Manhattan or whatever. LA had like, you know, a lot more like colorful style, you know, like just there was a lot more like emphasis on, I think, colors coming from the West Coast graffiti and stuff. But like since we were pulling from all of those things, I think it just was like a more well-rounded, you know, references or whatever. But I would say maybe outside of graffiti, the biggest influence on my graffiti from outside of actual graffiti was the movie Akira, the Japanese like animation.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, like back in the, you know, like late 90s, early 2000s, when I was doing a lot of the kind of more textural pieces, that was my thing, because I was not very good at like making like fill patterns. Like that was like one of the elements to like just learning the fundamentals of graffiti that I never really was that, I wasn't good at it, and I wasn't that interested in it either. And I thought like, well, if you have to fill up the interior of your letters with something, like I'm much more interested in maybe making like a texture or something that looks a little more three-dimensional, even if it's like contained within a two-dimensional letter. But the fill, I would try and make like you know, I would just like bug out on different things that I would be influenced by. I would see, you know, like, have you ever seen one of those big crystals and like a, I don't know, like a head shop or something, where it'll be like a rock, and then inside there'll be a bunch of like purple crystals and shit in there.
Yeah, I've seen like some form of that, sure.
Like I went through a phase where I was like doing a lot of like crystal formations, like dripping off my letters, or like make it look kind of like melted wax and stuff like that. Like, and I think like maybe because of my limitations with coming up with like fill patterns, that sort of became my thing, and maybe that made my stuff stand out at that time. But I think you know, a lot of those things too was like I know Tyke's graffiti was, it had more of a illustrational influence to it. Like he would kind of incorporate these weird faces and like creatures and stuff in his letters, where they had like, just his letters had like more of like a personality almost, because it had, you know, kind of human elements or like creatures sort of woven into it. And I thought that was really interesting. So that like was pretty inspiring to me.
Yeah, no, that's crazy that you mentioned that. I pulled up a piece of his work, like, because I was just going to talk about it towards the end. But as you mentioned, like characters hidden in the letters. I didn't even notice that, and I take a look, and there's just like totally these like eyeballs and like I don't know if it's like some weird tiger thing, but
he just did like weird stuff, but it looked very like polished and like competent. You know, like a lot of people, I think, even if they had that idea, they couldn't really pull it off the way that he was doing it, like in like that golden era of like mid to late 90s or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And also just think about like the anthropology of graffiti on in like these different regions is also interesting as well.
Yeah.
Next, I wanted to ask you about just other artists and your dream collaborations. So, like, who would you like to work with or paint with?
I don't know. There's so many. I can't even really. I'm trying to think. This is one of those questions where I'll think of like 10 really good ones an hour from now, but since you put me on the spot, I can't narrow it down to like a short list really.
Yeah. Have you done any collaborations in the past? I mean, I know you've painted walls with like all these other famous artists. Is there any like particular collaboration that you've done where you've thought like this is sick or like?
Yeah, I mean the first thing that's coming to mind is we had this iron lac wall, and this was something that they had been planning for like years and years, and it would always fall through at the last minute. You know, it was going on like 3 or 4 years where it was supposed to happen, and it kept not happening, and then everybody was just sort of over it. You know, like it wasn't worth getting excited about anymore. And then finally, like it ended up happening. But we had one of my homies that works at Iron Lac, this guy Twos, he was like one of the I don't know, core people from the company, but he was talking to this guy from Dubai who wanted to put on like some kind of graffiti event or festival or whatever. And over the course of that 3 years that they were like trying to put this thing together, I think he ended up getting connected to like one of the crown princes of like the Emiratis of Dubai. And, you know, these dudes have just endless money. And so finally they got this project green lighted, and they're like, okay, we're actually doing it this time. And I don't think we even knew it at the time. I thought we were just going over there to like paint, but as it turned out, like this project that the guy had wanted to do got rolled into this bigger event that the Emiratis were putting on, which is basically like the 40-year celebration of like the establishment of Dubai as like a city or whatever. It's kind of like their 4th of July, basically. And so this project just kept snowballing into this like bigger and weirder thing. And the project we were part of something they wanted to do, was like the longest continuous graffiti scroll in the world or something. So it was like they had like the Guinness Book of World Records people there to like verify it. And basically what it was is, at that particular time, this was about 10 years ago, right when the drone camera footage started being really popular. I don't know, for whatever reason in Dubai, they do a lot of stuff where they jump out of, like there's a lot of skydiving and there's a lot of drone footage happening. So they had all these crazy drones, like these massive drones that would be like, you know, 500 yards up in the air where you could barely see them, but they would like make all these cool videos and stuff. So what they did was they made, I don't know what the shape of Dubai is, but let's say like you all know what like the shape of California or the shape of Florida is or whatever, like the topographic map of like what this state looks like. Like they made the shape of the, you know, city or whatever state of Dubai out of these like walls that they constructed. And then they had these people working like round the clock, stitching together these massive sheets of canvas, because I guess that was part of what was required
to achieve like the Guinness record or whatever. Is it was on a scroll, like a continuous thing. And so they just stitched like probably like a mile, yeah, a mile of like canvases together and like attached them to these like walls. And I remember when we got there, we were supposed to start painting like 2 or 3 days later. And so they got these shuttle buses and took us to the spot. It was like kind of in the middle of just this like deserty area, and then the ocean or the beach, whatever, was set back a couple 100 yards from there. But they were still constructing the walls at this point, and they hadn't even started putting the canvas on it. And I was like, wait, well, like we're supposed to paint this in like 3 days and it's not even done. And it's like this massive thing. And everyone was just like, oh no, it'll get done, you know, because it's like it's Emiratis, like they have endless resources and they had teams of people out there. We went back like the next day or 2 days later, like all the walls were built. They started hanging the canvas on it. And I remember it was either the prince or one of the Emiratis came to like check on the progress. And he said, you know, it was on this big, just flat, like sandy area. And he's like, oh, I don't like that when people come to the event, they're going to get sand on their shoes. So he ordered like 1 million square feet of this like carpet to put down on top of the sand, which I'm sure they just probably threw it out after it was over. But it was
I thought you were going to say it was going to make him like redo it, like move it.
no, it was just so crazy. They like carpeted like the whole like ground, but it was,
Bro.
you know, it was the size of probably like 3 or 4 football fields maybe. And then like it was the inside perimeter of it and the outside perimeter of it. So it wasn't just, it was like a good portion of like the Ironlac team and then a bunch of writers from the Middle East, you know, people from kind of all over. But yeah, that was a crazy event. It was so cool though, like just the camaraderie and stuff, and the fact that we're out there painting for like 3 days in 110-degree weather. And it was actually over Thanksgiving. So I remember they had these big cooling tents where they had air conditioning in these long like white tents, and they would have like TVs and stuff in there. And on Thanksgiving they ordered us all food. Like they would cater it every day. Like we could just go into the tent and get food and stuff. And I have a photo. It's like, it looks like the Last Supper, but it's all the Ironlac team, and everyone's like sweaty and dying from being out in the sun all day, and just like buckets of like KFC and like pizzas and random stuff like on Thanksgiving Day. It's kind of funny. But yeah, that was probably the craziest like collaborative project I've been involved with.
Yeah, no, that sounds like just such a surreal opportunity.
It really was, yeah.
Where does that piece live now? I'm assuming they took it down, but does it live anywhere?
What I had heard was they were gonna like, because it was all on these like big canvases, they were gonna, once they deconstructed the wall, they were gonna like take the canvas off of it and they were gonna hang it in like bus shelters or something around the city. But that was the last I'd heard of it. Like I've never seen any photos of any of it since then, so I don't know.
Yeah,
probably in a landfill somewhere in Dubai or something.
Or maybe someone has it hanging in their palace.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's in like the presidential palace or whatever.
Yeah. So my next question, I guess questions pertain to Ironlac. So, I mean, this one I just came up with on the spot since you're talking about it, but it's just like, how did you get involved with Ironlac so closely? I mean, I could guess that's just like they wanted to paint sponsor you, or you wanted to paint sponsor from them. And just like, what do you think about Ironlac paint in particularly? Because I know that it's like high pressure, which is different from a lot of low pressure cans when I've used it.
It's not super high pressure. I'd say it's like mid-range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just like when I spray, I've gone like watermelon-ish like size sprays. Like
okay. Yeah.
definitely. I mean, maybe they have multiple, but just when I use it, I was just like, there's like a fat spray can for like bombs and stuff. So yeah, maybe you could just tell us about that.
I mean, like, I guess getting affiliated with them and eventually getting put on the team, it just sort of happened organically. I was, this was probably around like 2007, 2008-ish. I would go up to LA and paint with Rhyme when he was living out here a lot. And I think there was one day we were supposed to paint in Highland Park, and he's like, "Yeah, come through. There's this guy Linz from Australia here, and we're gonna go paint." So I met him up there, and Linz happened to be friends with Levi, who was the kind of founder of Iron Lac. I had never heard of the brand at that point because it was still basically just being developed in Australia. But he was over here for whatever reason, and he had some of the paint shipped, and or no, I think they were waiting for it to clear customs, so we were just using Rusto or whatever we had at that time. And he was telling me about, like, yeah, my friend's, starting this paint company, would you be interested in, couldn't we ship you some cans to just try out and get your feedback? And, eventually they want to start breaking into like the United States paint market, and like possibly form like a team or whatever. And I was like, the prospect of getting free spray paint was, like a dream come true. So I was like, yeah, definitely. So I think by the time he left, it still hadn't cleared customs, but eventually I was able to get a couple boxes of the paint. And at the time it was like, probably their first or second batch of paint that they had developed. And it was still kind of like rough around the edges. And I remember like the initial batches that they made just had this horrific smell to it. Like that was like kind of the trademark of Iron Lecter from that era. The best way I could describe it is like, how like if you ever get like fast food or something and you leave it in your car and then you come out and when you come back to your car, it smells like sort of greasy fast food. It sort of smelled like a McDonald's fillet of fish mixed with like fresh chocolate chip cookies. Like just the scent was so odd and so weird and like, yeah, I don't know. But like the one thing that it really had going for it was like it covered really well. It was a little squirrely as far as like the valves and stuff, and they had a lot of just famous like quality control issues trying to, but they're like developing a brand new thing on their own. And over time, I mean, those guys just killed it. Like they got like a really bad a bad rap. Some of it was deserved just because it wasn't, quality controlled enough before they released certain things, and they had trouble with the valves and stuff. But every generation of the paint, it just got better and better and better. And I mean, to this day, it's still like, I think across the board, it's like my favorite paint to use. I think like the versatility of the valves is one of the best things. The pressure, it's also one of those things too, where like, because I was fortunate enough to meet those guys and get sponsored by them, I was able to kind of adapt to using that paint and like know their color chart and stuff like that. So you just kind of really start building not only my painting skills, but along with kind of being complemented by having a consistent brand to use that I can kind of rely on and know like its strengths and its limitations and stuff. So it just, all the techniques and things that I was developing were kind of enhanced by the fact that I had a consistent and, constantly improving paint sponsor to sort of help me, along with that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I definitely heard about the smell and some quality issues early on, but I feel like today they've probably improved a lot, and they've fixed their valves, and like their valves are super good now. And just like the brand itself is like oriented towards graffiti artists, like they're really kind of like in touch with what graffiti artist wants, from what I hear. And from when I've used it, I was like, damn, like for some reason I fucking love this paint. And I tried to get it in Canada or the US right now, and I literally cannot find any retailer, which is really annoying. I don't know if you even know a retailer, but I've reached out to Iron Lac and I've like, can I order this? And they're like, no, but we can ship you a full crate for like $60,000 for like 24,000 cans. I'm like, oh, that's like $3 a can. That's not bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, there's like a big long story that I'm probably not at liberty to discuss, but something happened around the time that COVID was happening, and it just threw a monkey wrench into like the distribution and all that kind of stuff. So as far as like the United States, it's really hard to get it. I think the only place that you can get it these days is it's like an art craft store called Hobby Lobby. It's like a big chain. That's the only place I've seen it in recent years, but yeah, but I think a lot of that paint that's in Hobby Lobby now is they started making it in a factory, I think in Germany, maybe somewhere in Europe, but it's probably like the best iteration of the paint so far. Just everything is super dialed in. The valves, are like great. I don't know. It's between that and I mean, Iron Lac's like my number one go-to paint. I like the German Montana a lot too. Like I've gotten kind of used to using that just because it's what's available, but yeah, Iron Lac is my number one for sure.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to go splits on this giant crate or whatever. And
Yeah.
get a bunch of referrals going and bring it back. But
I'll let you know when I get 30,000 extra dollars together that we can go half on that.
sounds good.
Yeah.
So now for some questions I've like super been looking forward to. I just wanted to ask you about like your favorite places that you've traveled and places that you want to travel. I do have some specific questions regarding some locations that you've been that I'll ask towards the end, but I'll just let you take the stage and answer that question.
I mean, again, this is like another question that's really hard for me to narrow it down because I love like international travel. So even someplace that is not ideal, I always just having the experiences of like eating different foods, seeing different, like, I don't know. I love it. But off the top of my head, I mean, Japan is probably like near the top. I've been to Taiwan like I think twice, maybe 3 times. That's really great. Korea is great. But I think I'm probably most interested these days in like Latin America. Like I went to I traveled around in Mexico for 3 weeks, like maybe a couple months ago, like 5-6 months ago. But I've been to like Bogota, Colombia. I went to El Salvador about like maybe a year ago. That was really cool. But I mean, really anywhere. Like if I have the opportunity to like go somewhere and paint and just meet cool people and experience cultures and stuff, like there's not really. I mean, I think outside of the country, there's really no place I went that certain places were more comfortable and maybe more like, I don't know what you call it. Like when I travel, I don't really care about like touristy type stuff. I like seeing the culture, but I don't want to go to all the corny shit. I want to see like the real stuff where like the people that live there, like I want to see what the stuff that they do. I'll still go to like monuments and stuff. Like we went to the pyramids outside Mexico City. That's like Teotihuacan, something like that. I don't know. It's a really long word that's hard to pronounce. I like to go like see like the ancient stuff, or like we went to this pyramid on top of this like kind of cliff. Can't remember the name of the city in Mexico, but it was really cool. But yeah, just everything. I don't know. Japan is up there. Asia is up there. I'd like to go to Africa at some point. I really want to go to another good one that's near the top. Bali, Indonesia is pretty awesome. I want to go to Tahiti. I've never been there. I had the opportunity to go to Russia, and I was supposed to go to like St. Petersburg. And I've always been a little bit scared to go to Russia just because I don't think there's like too many black people there. And Russian people just seem a little bit like they could kill you at any moment. So I would feel a little like uneasy, but there's something about like going somewhere that you don't really know anything about, and it seems a little intimidating. That kind of just makes me want to do it more. So I had the opportunity to go there, but it fell through because it was some kind of like b-boy event or something where they had like some graffiti part of it, and it was supposed to happen, but then like COVID hit and everything just got killed. I don't know. I've wanted to go to Iceland just because it seems, like interesting, like all the nature stuff. I've never been there. But yeah, I would say like on the balance, I want to go to more like Latin America. Like I've never been to Brazil. I'd like to go to like Chile or Argentina, places like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big world that it's like impossible to get everywhere, but it's just like so cool. Like, I don't know. I feel like just it's like a privilege to be alive here and just like to see all these like amazing places.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the most like in touch with like being alive when I'm like traveling. Like when you're at your day-to-day just grind trying to pay your bills, it just feels like you're a robot just, doing things to survive. But like when you actually get to go see the world, it feels like you're actually like alive and doing something,
Yeah, and it's like just being someplace that's like unfamiliar where everything's new. It's just like so much more that your brain is just absorbing.
Yeah. Barcelona, that's another great place.
Oh yeah, I've been there for like a day. I wish I could have stayed more, but from like the one day I was there, I was like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my next question, almost like a follow-up to that one, is like, since you've probably tried a bunch of food, what's your favorite food or favorite foods, like culture-wise or dishes?
Thai food. It's my favorite. I think I could eat Thai food like every day.
Like fried rice stuff? Or
just like curries, anything with like coconut cream, like coconut based curries or stuff with like peanut sauces and stuff like that. I stopped eating meat in like maybe 93-ish. And then I'm mostly vegan as of like maybe 3 years ago. So that kind of influences, what I am able to eat when I travel or whatever. But yeah, I can usually find something, like I'm a bit overweight. So even if I have to starve myself for a couple days, it's not the end of the world. Like I'm not going to die. But yeah, Thai food is near the top. And I'd say probably second would maybe be like Vietnamese, maybe. We eat that a lot here. Just there's a lot of like Vietnamese neighborhoods and like restaurants by where I live. But I really like I had some really good food in like Peru too. Like Peruvian food is good. I like trying new stuff, so I'm kind of down for whatever. My wife's Japanese, so we eat a lot of Japanese food. I like udon noodles and veggie rolls and shit like that.
Nice. I actually just picked up a bunch of stuff from the grocery store today to try and replicate this Peruvian rice that I was having back home. It was like so sick. So trying that out. Yeah. Next, have you ever tried water-based paint or tried to incorporate that into your work? I feel like you would really like it if you haven't tried it. I've used it in some of my pieces. It's like you can you can spray it just like regular spray paint, and then you have like 5 minutes to like spray water over top of it, and you can get like these sick blends of colors and like
Interesting.
faded backgrounds, and so it like gives like this like faded background and like super contrasting to like just like regular spray paint. So I think if you'd love it if you like messed around with it. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I haven't done it extensively, and I don't think I've used it on a wall ever. I've used some of those little Montana water-based cans like in my studio, and it was kind of cool that you could sort of like spray it on the surface and it would sort of stay like wet for a little bit, where you kind of use like a paint knife or something to like sort of blend it around and whatever. But I didn't get super deep into it, but that's something I'd like to explore more.
Yeah, no, I love using it for backgrounds, like just spraying all like these light colors, and then I have like a crink sprayer. I just spray it and it just like melts, and I've just gotten like some unreal backgrounds out of it. It's like
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Next question is going to determine you're probably gonna get some hate for these ones, so watch out.
I don't care.
Bring it. Favorite music, books, movies, and TV shows.
All right, let's go one at a time. What's the first one?
Music.
I kind of like a little bit of everything. I mean, I primarily listen to hip hop just because that's, I guess, the most accessible to me. But I like a bunch of stuff. Trying to think, like Radiohead. I like Gorillaz. I like Pink Floyd. I like old Black Sabbath with. Trying to think. I like R&B. I like whatever. It just depends on what era and who it is. Like, I don't know. I like a little bit of everything.
Do you listen to music while you're painting?
Not as much as I should. I mean, every time, like I end up like listening to podcasts and a lot of like politics podcasts, and I'm kind of just over it because it's all bad most of the time. It just puts
politics
me in
is depressing.
Yeah, like I don't know why it's like appealing to me to like just keep filling my brain with all of this like insanity, but that's primarily what I'm listening to. But I want to get more in the routine of listening to music when I work, because I definitely think it adds another dimension to just putting your brain in a different frequency, that's more conducive to like being creative, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are you a big reader? What are your favorite books?
Not as much as, yeah, I to be completely honest, I haven't I read like articles and things. I don't have a lot of free time to just read for like pleasure, but hopefully at some point, like if my career takes off a little bit and I have a little more time to not be working constantly, I can, carve out more space to like sit down and read a book. It's always something I want to do when I'm like on a long flight, but for whatever reason, as soon as I get on a plane, I just want to go to sleep, usually because I've been working, I'm staying up like all night trying to get all my stuff done before I go somewhere. So I'm usually just like knocked out by the time I get in my seat. Trying to think of what the last book I read. It wasn't the last one I read, but I read this book on this LA gangbanger dude named Monster Cody. And that was a really dope book. That was years ago, but I've read stuff since then. I'm just trying to remember. It's been a while. Something I want to get back to more, but yeah, I ended up just mainly just reading like articles about politics and other stuff.
Yeah, no, I feel that a lot too. It's like hard to commit to a book when you're just like bouncing around and just like, I just want to read a quick thing and like move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also kind of conditioning from like phones and social media, like just killing people's attention spans,
Yeah, no, for sure. Next one is movies, but I'll add another one, and another element would be documentaries. Personally, one of the like my favorite documentary probably I've ever seen is called like Grizzly Man, about some like total nut job that just like goes
I've
through
heard about that
Alaska.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, you should watch it. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's like so funny and like so just everything. You like gets mauled by a grizzly after 12 years at the end. Like it's just crazy. But you see like this like found footage almost style. It's like so
That's not the
good.
one by Werner Herzog, is it?
I have no idea who made it. I'll Google it right now. I don't. Yeah, it is.
Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah, I think I've seen clips from it. I don't think I've seen the whole thing though.
Yeah. So, do you have a favorite documentary or movies that you like? I think for movies, just I was thinking about it today. I mean, I totally mind blank, but I was just like, apparently my instinct tells me like Happy Gilmore is like, if I only have one movie to watch, it's gonna be Happy Gilmore before like the hostage or the terrorist fucking decapitates me or whatever.
Here's a sleeper comedy that I want to put you onto if you haven't seen it already. Have you ever seen the movie MacGruber?
Oh, fuck. I've definitely heard of it, but I've never watched it. I think.
That was some like I think it was a spin-off from like a Saturday Night Live skit back when like Saturday Night Live sucked, so I'd never really paid attention to it or cared to ever see it. But back at my old studio when I had a TV and like cable and stuff, I would just draw and watch cable, like just as kind of background music or background noise just to keep me company while I'm working. And this was years ago, but like they started playing putting MacGruber into the rotation on HBO. That movie's super funny. Like it was one of those movies that just flew under the radar. I never really heard any like good reviews about it or anything, but it's funny. Check that out. As far as like my go-to movies that I kind of judge them based on how much I like them and how like rewatchable they are. I think that's kind of like a big a key to like a good movie. Not all of them. Sometimes like one is enough, or if it's like really heavy subject matter, you kind of don't need to watch it a whole lot of times. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think like Casino and Goodfellas is just, or like Godfather 2. Like every time those come on, like back when I had cable, if I'd be scrolling through the channels and I would see like, oh, it's Goodfellas. Like no matter what I was doing, I would just I felt like compelled to just watch the whole thing, But I don't know. I really like that movie Buffalo 66. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. Another one on the watch list.
No, it's a great movie. Training Day. I just watched that again the other day. Pretty much any like Denzel movie is like watchable, like just
Yeah. No, my favorite ones from Denzel are probably like Pelham 123 and that bank robbing one. I forgot what the fuck it's called now.
Inside Man
Yeah.
with Clive Owen.
Yeah.
Have you seen City of Men? I think it's called. It's Clive Owen movie. It's kind of like a like near future sort of apocalyptic movie.
It has Denzel on it?
No, it's Clive Owen.
Oh. No, I haven't watched that one, but
That's
I'll
a
check
really
it out.
good one. Yeah, I don't know if like it's hard for me to have favorites in kind of any category. Like even with like graffiti, like I just go through phases where I'm like really into like, like I have like a pool of people that are at the top, like my top 50 or my top 100 people that I really like. And at any given time, like different people will kind of move into like the top 5 or whatever. And it's sort of the same thing with like music and movies and stuff like that. Trying to think of other movies that I'm really into. Akira, the Japanese anime, like that's always been like just a huge inspiration as far as like art and just visually. It's pretty amazing. I like the first Blade Runner. That was really dope.
Yeah, no, I agree with that one. Really sick.
I'm trying to think. I don't know. All these type of questions, like I'll think of like, 10 good answers later, but it's hard to like corral them in my brain at the moment.
Yeah, no, I'm same way. If you put me on the spot, I just cannot
Oh,
think
you
of
know,
anything.
it's a dope movie that I just watched the other day. I had seen it a couple of years ago, but there's a movie called Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. Have you seen that?
I've watched it like a long time ago.
You should
But
rewatch it. It's pretty dope.
yeah. No, I definitely remember seeing that one. And definitely gets like a lot of good reviews.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Sweet. Next one is just like your project ideas. What do you have going on in your mind? What cool things are you dreaming of that you can't do, and what the cool stuff are you dreaming of that you can do?
Well, there's a lot that I want to do. I mean, eventually I'd like to move into making 3D stuff, whether it's like figures or like,
Like on the computer or like sculptures?
sculptures, like
Okay.
I guess they'd probably start on a computer at some point and then turn into like an actual three-dimensional object, but just working in 3 dimensions, like one of my projects that I just haven't had time to get to is well, this is kind of a 2-for-1 answer. Like I have this long-term project that I've been working on for about a year and a half, and it'll probably take me at least like another year to 2 years to complete. It's like a graphic novel project. So I've been like developing all these characters for the story and stuff. And I would eventually like to make some kind of, figures, whether it's like those little homies things that you would get out of like the vending machines. Did you ever see those?
No, I was thinking about like the little jelly bean things I used to play with as a kid, but
Did you ever see those muscle characters? They're like a little kind of peach colored like plastic. They have like a unique like smell to them, but they're these little wrestling figures. They're about this big.
I'm not familiar with them, but I'm not familiar with like a whole lot of stuff. I'm like the most
Yeah,
uncultured
you're
person.
probably like a couple of years, probably maybe a couple decades younger than me, but yeah. That's a really cool thing to just look up online. Those, I can't remember what, I think they originated from Japan, but then they marketed them in the United States as muscle. It's like M.US, like there's periods in between, but it's just the word muscle. And they're these little like pinkish peach colored like wrestling figures. They don't have any like articulated joints or anything, but they're just like really these cool little creative little like sculpture things made out of this like kind of hard plastic or kind of like a rubbery like plastic. But I want to make something like that or maybe bigger versions of stuff like that.
Make your own Tamagotchi
That's what they're
software.
called. Yeah.
Oh, that's what it's called?
Oh wait, no.
Oh.
It's a Japanese word, but I can't remember what it is.
Okay.
The original name for those things. What's a Tamagotchi? That's like a
Oh, it's like this old toy that was like super popular, whereas like you get like this like little computer thing and you have to like raise these like Pokemon thing. I never even got one, but
it was like one of those little digital toys that you have to like feed it and whatever.
yeah, but you like connect to like other players and like battle and kill their little like creatures and shit.
Yeah. I never got into any of that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd say as far as just like creative stuff, I want to get into making music. Like I don't have any natural talent for that, but I really enjoy music and I have like some like little like drum machine sampler things. I have ideas for stuff that I want to work out in music, and it's basically just backfilling that with like knowing how to, manipulate the software and whatever. But it's kind of like a luxury to be able to get to the point where I can just explore doing creative stuff as a hobby as opposed to like a means to paying bills. Like I haven't really gotten to that level yet, but I'm hoping, in the next 5 or 10 years, I can carve out more space to just pursue some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, ideally it would be just awesome to just have like a huge warehouse with infinite paint and just like infinite money to spend on guitar amps and synths.
Yeah.
And we live in the world apparently, so that's
Yeah.
not going to happen unless you really do well, but that's
Right.
also a possibility. And I think
Hopefully.
that you are doing well. I mean, I hope you're doing well. I feel like you definitely deserve to do well since you're like a legend.
Oh.
I thought you were like total like super like rich and like everyone in MSK was like loaded.
Yeah, there's a handful that are doing pretty well, and everyone else is kind of just, surviving.
Yeah. So I guess I'll ask you next about just like the galleries and art scene and what you think about that, and then like what you think about the graffiti scene in contrast.
I don't know. I would say like the difference between like the fine art scene and the graffiti scene is kind of like the thing I like more about graffiti is it's a little more honest. It's a lot more honest, to tell you the truth. Like if you're out there and you're really doing it and you're really putting in work and you're making good stuff, like whether or not that's compensated or like rewarded in traditional ways, you will carve out your space within graffiti. Whereas like I think in the fine art and like the gallery world, there's a lot of factors that are far beyond just the work itself, you know. And I think there's a lot of things about the fine art world that are a little bit limiting, in terms of like I think when people are doing gallery shows, they're not doing it coming from the same perspective as like people that are just going out to paint a wall. I feel like graffiti is kind of like one of the more purest forms of art, just because you go paint a wall behind like a abandoned factory or something, like you don't expect anything out of that. Like you don't expect to be rewarded or to get any kind of accolades or money or anything out of that. I mean, subsequently, like you do that a couple hundred or a couple thousand times, and maybe graffiti turns into something where you can make a living or you can travel or you can make money. But I think in the moments that you're actually doing those things, the benefits or the rewards are not even on the radar. I'm not thinking about like, oh, if I do enough good pieces, I'm going to get paid, or I'm going to get, opportunity to do something. At the most, maybe like my biggest like tangible goals as far as being a graffiti artist was just get the respect of other writers. And I think when I first started off, get good enough where I could maybe get a picture in like a graffiti magazine or something like that. And then once it happened, it was like, you're kind of on cloud nine for like 3 minutes. And then it's like, oh yeah, this is just like a graffiti magazine that probably they printed 500 copies and maybe 200 of them have sold already. So you realize it's not that big of a deal. It's not like being on the front page of, I don't know, the Wall Street Journal or something, or New York Times. It's just whatever. But I
Times Square.
huh?
Yeah, it's not like being on like Times Square. It's
Yeah,
giant advertisement.
but I think like I don't know, graffiti is just pure. It's just what like I never painted thinking that I was going to get anything out of graffiti. Like I never expected anything out of it. It was just fun. It was just a challenge. It was like something that I was just passionate about, and I was driven for reasons other than like monetary success or getting anything tangible out of it. Whereas I think like when you move into like the gallery world, obviously you want to like sell your work, like whether it's just to support yourself or to kind of move up that, food chain and establish value for your work. I think both of them have like merit to them, but I like the fact that it's graffiti is kind of the domain of other graffiti writers, whereas in the fine art world, you're kind of a commodity almost. and you become like a brand that can be monetized by other people that like are beyond you. Like if you get represented by the right gallery, they have access to people with like real money that could potentially collect your work if you play the game the right way. And that's kind of like a challenge within its own ecosystem or whatever. But I like the simplicity of graffiti where you just go out and do it, and whether it's good or not, like if you feel some moments of being alive when you're out like bombing a freeway or painting a freight train in the middle of the night in the snowstorm or something, like there's something like really special about it that I don't think you get out of just working on a canvas in your studio and hoping you can sell it so that you can pay your rent or whatever. Like
there's not like that journey of trespassing through like all this shit and like stealing fucking paint, like being a criminal and shit.
Yeah.
And then you like go and you put your artwork out for free on a train for people versus like, oh, I'm just gonna like do my best to profit and make money. I mean, obviously, like that's not every single gallery creator's like motives, but it's like just like
I mean, they're just the different formats. Like I don't even really like to compare one to the other because they're just different. They're just inherently different. Just the way that they're perceived, the way that they're viewed, the fact that you have to go to like a gallery to see stuff or go to a museum to like see arts. I think that's cool, and I enjoy doing those things. But it's great to like kind of integrate that passion and that art into just the geography of places, like to go down back alleys and, like walk on train tracks to find stuff.
Or it's just like amazing when you're just walking somewhere and you just see like just like layers and layers of graffiti and like all this history of like just this random spot where all these people have just come and just like put up their symbol and stuff, and it's just like creates like this entire like art piece on its own of just like this collection of like spirits that have like passed that wall, which I think is like
and I think too, like the fact that it's very impermanent. A lot of stuff, if you get a piece that runs for 5 years these days, like it's kind of a big deal. Like just to actually see it with your own eyes in person before it gets buffed or before some idiot like scribbles on it or whatever, like that's a whole element that doesn't exist in like gallery work. Like you might be able to go see it at the opening and then some rich guy buys it and just sequesters it in his condo or whatever, and maybe 30 years later, if that person's career is taken off, you'll be able to see something from his collection in a art history book or in a museum show or something. But it's not the same as just everybody having the opportunity to just see it on their way to work in the morning or something like that.
I mean, like they're just two completely different realms, like you say. I mean, one thing that's just like disappointing to me, at least anyway, I mean, I hate to be a critic and a harsh criticizer and judge other people's work, but when I see like Revoke, or I said Revoc, I say Revoc for some reason, and I figured out it's Revoke, but I mean, like I was just so in love with his old graffiti work, and it was just like so inspiring to me. And then fast forward to 2023, he's like taking like just like 4 line or like 8 lines of cans, and it's like and it's like this like it doesn't capture like I know he's like such a creative guy and like capable of like so much artistic work, and it's like, and I get it's creative and like innovative to come up with a can that sprays 8 cans, but it's like just missing like so much art and creativity. And I love to just see like his abstract and artistic abilities transfer into like his art pieces, whereas like his gallery art is like the most like the definition of like stereotypical art gallery pieces, where it's like kind of like these like
I disagree, because I think he's done something really, like you can like it or not like it, but I think it's deeper than just making some lines, you know? I think he's kind of like distilling down his graffiti to like the what is it called? Like the common denominator, or like so you're sort of boiling it down to like the root essence or like the molecules of like what one of his pieces is. You can kind of just reduce it down to like these lines and these colors. And I what I think is really genius about it is the fact that when you see like his videos where he'll go out with that machine and just cover like a whole wall, where he'll like walk down like a full block or go down like steps, you know, like 30 steps with that thing and just make like a pattern. Because I think there's something really awesome about, and I think this is where like it bleeds over into fine art being more of like a branding exercise, you know, like to kind of cultivate a look that's consistent, that, you know, people can buy into. You know, like one of the things that it's hard for me to really one of the difficult things for me to kind of, I think, be successful with fine art is I my mind is all over the place, and I'm constantly trying to like go in different directions with my work. And I feel like the formula to kind of be successful as an artist within like the gallery world is consistency, like producing something, you know, like Retina's work, like with the hieroglyphs or like the calligraphy that he does is instantly recognizable. And I think that that goes a long way in terms of just marketability and recognizability of people's, to have like a trademark. And so what Revoke is doing with, he's using the tools of graffiti, and he's using it in public spaces, and he's covering like these giant, you know, sections of walls with something that's instantly recognizable as his own work. Where it's like, even though it doesn't say Revoke, if you see one of those things, it's like, that's a Revoke wall. You know what I mean? Like he short circuited making the wild style and doing all, you know, spending 6 hours on painting a wall to something that he can do in 45 seconds, and it achieves the same effect. And being able to have that straddle both something that you do in public and something in the gallery, I think is pretty genius. You know, I think if nothing else, you can, you know, like personally, I like his graffiti better than I like some of those things, but I appreciate both of them equally because he's just expanded the envelope of what he can do to include something entirely unique and different from his, you know, graffiti, you know. And the fact that he can be so incredibly successful in both those worlds is really admirable and inspiring, you know, to me personally, at least.
Yeah, no, I definitely see what you're saying there. And I'm not trying to like trash Revoker or whatever, since he's like so inspiring. And like some of the stuff I do really like, that's like more complex. I just feel like the simplicity of like the lines versus like in contrast to like a graffiti piece of his where it's like super intricate. I would just love to see like that intricacy and like complexity in like an abstract form where it's not like in graffiti letters. I think that would just like, produce like a like I don't know, a next level piece in my opinion. But I back to like the gallery world, it's like this whole different like idea, and like you're like sniping a whole different target. So I get what you're saying with like creating a brand that's like identifiable and like recognizable. So
Yeah. One of the things too, this was like something I was really thinking a lot about. This was several years ago. It was kind of when the rise of like street art was sort of kind of running parallel to graffiti. And in a lot of ways, like a lot of graffiti, like traditional graffiti artists would sort of hate on street art. And there was a lot of really shitty street art happening that was just kind of like mindless, uninspired, just branding exercises. And people were getting all these walls and opportunities to make money that they didn't really deserve because, you know, the work that they were doing was garbage, and they hadn't really been doing it for more than like 6 months. you know, and they're just getting all these accolades and like opportunities and stuff, and essentially like shitting on these walls that, you know, like we had painted, you know. But I think one of the things it's really easy to just exist within the world of graffiti and just think about it purely in terms of like keeping it real in the essence of graffiti. But I think there was a point where I started thinking about like when the street artists, quote unquote, were like really getting a lot of play with like normies and just like popular culture. And they were kind of like, it was sort of like way less culturally relevant than like traditional graffiti was, way less history and way less like any of the things that make it like relevant or valid art form. You know, a lot of it was just like, oh, I'm gonna make like a Richie Rich character and put like a Dr. Seuss hat on it and, you know, wheat paste it.
Alex Monopoly.
And it's like none of that means anything. It's not like significant. It's not creative. It's not unique. You know, like it doesn't check off any boxes that matter. But those people would, you know, get like just money shoveled their way. Meanwhile, like people like Saber, that's, you know, mastered his craft 20 years ago and is still like killing it. You know, he's not getting that shine that he would, you know, rightly deserve. So I think like I was trying to like think outside the box instead of just going hard and like, oh, I'm gonna make like the craziest wild styles. Figure out like, well, what is the thing that scares off normies from graffiti, and can you reach people that are not initiated or not knowledgeable enough about graffiti to still like your thing just the same, and maybe not even realize that they're looking at graffiti, but at the same time you can do something that has integrity to other graffiti writers and sort of exists in both worlds, you know, like I feel like as a graffiti writer, your target audience is other graffiti writers, but it would be pretty powerful if you could maintain a quality of work that was not selling out or compromising, but at the same time kind of was inclusive to people that had no entry to like even knowing about graffiti. You know, I kind of look at it as like, if you don't know how to read like Chinese kanji or something, you can look at it and it can look kind of beautiful and intricate, and you can see elements of it that are artistic or symmetry or something like that that's appealing. But if you don't know the history of it or what it says or what it means or like how it evolved, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, and that limits your ability to appreciate it. And I kind of see that the same way for like normies looking at graffiti. You know, like they've been propagandized to being like, this is something gang related, or this is bringing down the property value, or, you know, all the dumb shit that they pump into people's brains on the news. But I think if you can kind of on-ramp them into how amazing this art form is, that's, you know, been like a worldwide phenomena for the last however many 40, 50 years, whatever. I think you could get people to appreciate it. Now, obviously, like some people don't care whether like regular people or non-writers like their work or they actively want them to dislike it. But I think there's something to like reaching the uninitiated, you know, and kind of giving them an on-ramp to appreciate it. Because in the long run, like, you're not going to be bombing freeways forever or painting subways forever. Like, I want there to be more opportunities for people that have put in work doing graffiti to cross over into being able to sell their work in galleries or just make a living off of their work, whether they end up going the fine art routes or just being able to sell their graffiti like how, you know, Scene does. I think like the more the world is open to embracing this and understanding it in the way that we do and knowing how amazing and awesome it is, it's just going to be beneficial for people. You know, like I want everybody to kind of win that's put in work and help develop this thing, because I just think it's important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just like the amount of murals that probably existed like 20 years ago versus the amount now. Like now you can follow Instagram writers who are just going and painting like massive skyscrapers and like huge buildings, and
Yeah.
just like super eye-opening and leaves like a good impression on people because they look at it and like, oh, that's really good actually. It's not
Yeah.
the toy that like tagged my thing.
Yeah. 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 A lot of people just the second they know it's done with spray paint, they just assume that they can't relate to it because it's just taggers doing it. But you know, I don't know. I think if you care enough to try and expand your audience beyond just the people that already know about it, it's like with politics. Like you don't want to just talk to people that agree with you. You want to try and convert people. Like if you believe in the thing that um, if you believe in this thing enough and it's important enough to you, you want to kind of share that with people that might not be on that same frequency yet. At the same time, like I don't care to like make a bunch of suburban dads like graffiti or whatever. I mean, ultimately, like that's how subcultures get ruined. There's too many like weirdos and normies get involved in it, and then it just becomes lame. But I kind of think like graffiti's in a special category just because there's so many layers of illegality to it that it's never going to go like fully mainstream and get lame. It just hopefully there's some kind of middle ground where more people can kind of not have to work like a 9 to 5 job and can do something either with their graffiti or with their artwork to make a living.
Yeah, we definitely don't need a bunch of suburban dads going out and painting the town.
I mean, it'll be funny, like, like I'm not against it, but yeah, they're never gonna get good unless they really put in the time. And in that case, they won't be like lame dads anymore. They'll be just middle-aged, weird graffiti writers, I guess.
Oh man. So next I want to ask you about some MSK members. I'll start with the ones that have passed away. Norm and Next. Did you have any relationship with them? Did you know them personally? Or how, like, what is your perspective on them?
Yeah, I knew both of them. I wasn't like super close with either of them, but they were both really good dudes. I as far as Norm was concerned, he was actually we were potentially he was gonna help apprentice me to like start tattooing because I was kind of at a crossroads with my career trying to figure out what I was gonna do, and he was super encouraging. And but he was because he was pretty established in his career, he was traveling a lot. And so I think when we had talked about it, we were going to kind of like link up, and he was going to try and help me get my foot in the door. But he was overseas for a couple months, and I think shortly after he came back, he passed away. So that never really came to fruition. Or no, actually, what had happened was I ended up moving to Boston for a couple of years for a different job, and after I'd moved back to California, he passed away. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if I feel comfortable saying too much, but I mean, both of them were great. Like Next, he was another like really just unique, impressive person. Like his drive to just he did everything to like volume 10, like,
Yeah,
and he was just such a unique person. I remember like one of my favorite experiences was I think I was in New York when I was working at my former job. We were there, and I think we went out at night, and we were in some random bar. I don't remember whether I had called him or he just happened to be around, and maybe the person I was with called him or something, but he came through and he was wearing like boat shoes and like khakis and like a like a cardigan sweater with like a really expensive looking like dress shirt. And he walked in and I'm just like, yo, like, like, what is it that you're like, what do you like? I was so confused, because every other time I seen him, we're like in the mud, like painting graffiti, like stepping on like bum shit, like, and, and he looked and he's like, oh, like, he's like, I'm undercover. I was racking earlier today. Um, he's like, yeah, if you're like a white dude, you just dress like an architect and you can like steal whatever you want. Like nobody looks twice at you or whatever. I was like, oh, that's pretty smart. And but yeah, I don't know. He was an interesting person. Like I like I said, I didn't spend a ton of time with him or with Norm, but I have nothing but good things to say about both of them. They're really
Yeah.
like stand dudes and just really influenced a lot of people. So rest in peace, Norm, and rest in peace next.
Yeah, I mean, both had just unreal careers, and they're just like so renowned and looked up to by like a lot of people.
Yeah.
So,
Another funny story was Next was in Minneapolis several years. This is probably 20 years ago or something. He had moved out there for a while. I think he was staying with Slug from Atmosphere, the rap group Atmosphere. He was staying at his house for a while. And so we would see him all the time. Like we'd paint sometimes. And him and my roommate, this guy Much, they went out to paint freights one night, and I think he asked me if I want to go, and for whatever reason I was just like, nah, because like Next was like super hardcore, and I had this formula for like you should do the amount of graffiti that makes sense for the place that you live. Because if you do too much and you live in like a small or mid-sized city, like you're gonna get caught sooner or later. Like you can kind of melt into the background if you live in New York or like LA, because there's so many people. Like you really have to be doing some obnoxious like stuff to like make it on like graffiti task force list, But like in Minneapolis, like you can basically go out for like 3 nights and hit a couple of like landmark spots and you'll be like top of the list, people that the police want to get. So you kind of got to like maneuver through that. But because he wasn't like planning on staying there. I think he lived there for maybe like a year and a half, but he just went absolutely bonkers. To the point where I was like, I just felt like something bad was going to happen sooner or later. And I remember this one particular night, Much and Next we're going to paint trains. They invited me to go, and I was like, nah, I think I'm just going to kick it with my girlfriend. And then later that night, I think I got a call or somebody told me like, yeah, they got busted. They're in jail. So I was like, shit. And then we were trying to figure out how to get them out. And I think they got released like a day or two later, but like maybe an hour before they got released. I'm trying to remember. I don't know if I went to go pick them up from jail or what, but I know like right after they got released, when we came back to the apartment after that, our place had been raided and like cops had like turned over all of our shit and like took a bunch of our like photo albums, and I think they took my computer or something, like a bunch of stuff that was just totally unrelated to anything. They took a bunch of like graffiti magazines and stuff, and it didn't even seem like they were really using it to build a case. It was more or less just to inconvenience us and be dicks. And so after about like 6 or 8 months, my roommate's lawyer was able to get our stuff back. But it was just yeah, that's my my next story. But yeah, that dude, like, he was in it to win it. Like, there was no like slowing down for that guy. But yeah, both of those guys were really great, and I was blessed to have spent the time with them that I did.
yeah, man. I mean, that was a wild story. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
I'll ask you about some other crew members, I guess. One, I mean, I don't know where to start because there's so many, but I know you've painted with Augur, and I know that you painted with Trav. So maybe you could just spill a little bit about them. Do you have any stories about painting with them?
Yeah, I mean, I've known Trav since he was like a teenager. Like he came out, uh, he was out in Minneapolis for a while too. I don't know why so many like noteworthy people came through Minneapolis. I think it was just because the scene was pretty cool. It's like a really, really dope city. But I remember painting how you were talking about earlier, those winter missions where you're just like freezing your ass off. I remember one time we used to make this graffiti magazine called Life Sex Die, and we had a little office that sort of overlooked this train yard, and so it was nice because we could kind of see when they pulled in like new lines of trains, and we could just go outside and paint. And there was also trains on the front side of the building, but those were usually like just hoppers and like local, kind of crappier trains, but you could kind of paint them as much as you wanted because it was really chill. And so I remember one time, I can't remember if there was someone else with us, but me and Trav were painting some of those trains. And I remember we were both like, our pieces were coming out really good, but the weather just kept getting shittier and shittier over the course of like an hour. Just it was like getting cold, and it started like raining, and then the rain started freezing. And so like we're like maybe 60-70% of the way done with our pieces, and we're seeing just like this ice sheet just like kind of slowly like sliding down. So we're like quickly trying to like finish outlining and like get our highlights and stuff on it. And our hands were just so fried by the time we got done. And he's just like, he just looked so bewildered when we went back in the office. He's like, fuck, that sucked. I was like, yeah, that's what we got to do for like 4 months out of the year. Like, if you want to paint, you just got to, you just got to be willing to sacrifice your hands a little bit. But yeah, it was cool. Like, I've known Trav for like a super long time. I was just in Mexico with him and his girlfriend and Chems and a couple other people, like some of my homies from Mexico. But like we were out there for like 3 weeks this past summer, and yeah, he's a good dude. He's making some really good artwork, and it's just an interesting person to talk to. Like, who else? Oh, Augur. Yeah, I haven't seen Augur for a long time. I know he kind of went through like a rough patch and was figuring stuff out, but I think he ended up going to like art school. And I shoot him like a message on Instagram every once in a while, but he's making some really dope artwork. Like, I know he's had some really good gallery shows. I think he got like a master's degree from UCLA or something like that. I don't know, something like, but he's really killing it. Like, his art is dope.
Yeah, I mean, like just seeing his stuff on the internet, like, and it's just like his nuts style where it just like looks so like gobbly and like cool.
Yeah, he was wild. Like, I mean, he came right out of the gate just like super, just he had like that really like high powered like youth energy and was just going for it, so it was cool to see that because I was significantly older, but like, yeah, it was nice to see him really getting his shine. I think unfortunately, like, just the lifestyle he was leading kind of caught up with him, and he sort of needed to like recalibrate. And I think that's like, I think there's probably some maybe legal reasons to kind of take a break for a while. I don't know. I don't want to put anybody's business in the street, but I think that's probably safe to talk about. But yeah, I mean, I think he's doing really good, and I'm just proud of seeing like his development or whatever, stuff like that. Like, people like him that are like super talented, people like him and Trav. I've seen both of those kids because both of them are a lot younger than me, or at least a couple years younger than me. To see them kind of go from like wild ass like teenagers and young men to kind of like really getting their shit together and just really focusing and like making nice work, and just kind of being just easing into being a semi-responsible adult is pretty cool to see, especially if to kind of see the whole transformation happen over the course of like 10, 15, 20 years or whatever. It's cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, you must feel like, I don't know, like, must sleep cozy at night just knowing that you like have connections to all these legendary people. I mean, I know I would. I mean,
It's
maybe you don't feel like that, but
it's a weird thing because depending on who it is, like it was bugged out to get put down with AWR just because at that period of time, like most of those dudes were like some of my favorite writers. And it's just like surreal to be like, man, I'm like one of these dudes now, and it was a lot to live up to and a lot of like pressure to like, be worthy of just being in that type of company. But after a while, like when you just hang out with people enough times, it's just like another person, and periodically you'll still get reminded like, oh yeah, this guy's like no joke. He's dope, like, so it's kind of like halfway between just one of your random, just like one of your friends, but at the same time, they're also like superstars that are admired by, tens of thousands of people worldwide. So it's bugged out.
yeah, no, interesting dilemma there.
Yeah.
The next people I just want to ask you, and this is the last group I'll ask you about, is Saber, Retina, and Zesser. I guess Revoke too, if you want to lump that in. Have you painted with like Zesser, Saber, or anyone of those?
Most of the walls I usually do when I'm painting with other people from the crew is usually just like, daytime like chill walls. And I know Zess is very like traditionalist with his graffiti. Like I don't think he likes painting legal walls at all, or he's really in it for like, the adrenaline factor and just doing like, he keeps it real with like street level illegal graffiti.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, in one capacity or another, I've painted with all those dudes before.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know what more do you want me to expand upon?
I don't know, like just like your impressions of their careers, I guess. I mean, like I know Saber is just like pretty wild style and like does a bunch of crazy stuff, and Retina is kind of like the same way. Anything to like reflect upon, or?
I mean, it's a lot to it's a lot to get my arms around. I mean, yeah, like all those dudes have influenced me, whether it's directly or indirectly just by their contributions to this thing. Like I remember looking at Retina's his hand styles and stuff from a long time ago. I remember before I don't even know if he was in MSK at that time. It was before I think before I got in AWR. I remembered seeing Retina on a wall with these LTS guys. It was like 5 or 6 pieces back to back, and they just had such crazy styles. Like it was really cool. I think there was a guy named Sinner that had a really cool style, but they did these pieces that just look like these, like they almost look like Hoochie sweaters, kind of like they had these really zigzaggy kind of like stock tip like fills, but it was like a bunch of crazy colors, and it
Yeah,
just really bizarre. And I later found out like I think some or all of them were like on acid at the time that they did these pieces, but they were amazing. Like it's just super unique. Like I'd never really seen any styles like that before.
yeah, no, that's
And just following like Retina's career is pretty surreal. Like the level that he's at now, where he's like, sometimes I'll just scroll through Instagram and he'll just be like chilling with Usher, like in front of a Bentley or some shit, like at Mr. Chow's with like some celebrity or some supermodel. It's just like,
yeah, he's like crazy famous.
yeah, it's really bugged out. But yeah, no, I have respect for all those dudes. Like a lot of those people have made an impact on my work and my my art. So yeah, I don't know what more to say. Like,
Yeah, no, all good. I mean, you don't have to speak too long about it. I just wanted
Yeah.
to get something. And LTS is like super sick crew.
yeah,
I know I'm trying to set up a interview with 7Cs from LTS. He said he was down.
nice.
Yeah. Where's my next question here? Yeah, this is kind of a random one, but animals. Do you have a spirit animal? What do you think of animals? Favorite ones? I know it's like
how did you come up with that question?
I don't know. I mean, I'm influenced by animals a lot in my artwork, and like
Yeah.
I love to paint them, and I feel like they're like super fascinating. So I just wanted to get your views on those.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of appreciate the vagueness of the question, but yeah, no, I'm into animals, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I stopped like eating them years ago. It's just when you recognize the commonality between living creatures and the common fact of being able to experience suffering and fear and like I don't know. I when I was in college, that was when I first even got acquainted with the idea of vegetarianism and veganism. But there was a kid that lived in our dorms that was like pretty hardcore animal rights activist. This guy named Freeman. I think his name was Freeman Smith. He was a really cool guy, and he was the person that kind of opened my eyes to just this stuff, because I think I was like a lot of people at that time where, you go get a burger, you go eat chicken or, whatever, drink milk and stuff. And it's just like a product that you get at the store, but you're not connected, like intimately connected to the industry of suffering behind those things. And seeing like the way he approached it, I think was really admirable, because a lot of times, and I try and be on the right side of that line too, where people are passionate and like activists about these things to the point that they kind of they sort of put people off, like they're trying to kind of proselytize these things that I think are definitely worthwhile messages to put out there. But I think you have to really take some consideration in how you present it to people, because nobody likes to feel like they're getting admonished for their, what they eat or their lifestyle or whatever. But I think the way that he introduced me to those things was, he was just very like, he would just answer like we would have questions and he would answer them. He'd be like, yeah, like if you guys are interested in this stuff, I have some, stuff you can read. He like showed us like these like early like PETA videos where they would show like slaughterhouse footage and stuff. I remember seeing this one where it was like it was a slaughterhouse and they had all these chickens on this conveyor belt. They kind of funneled them into this like single file line, and at the end of the line there was a dude that had this machine. It was like a lever that he would push down, and it was like these hot blades, and they would just chop their beaks off and then throw them into a bin. And whoever like was undercover filming at that factory, they showed this process. It's just like endless chickens going down this like corridor. The guy grabs them by the throat, sticks their face in the thing, chops their beak off, throws them into this bin. And there's just all these beakless chickens just like bewildered because they had half their face cut off and they're bleeding. And just like, you can just see it. Like, even though you can't understand what they're saying or communicate with them verbally, you just can empathize and recognize that level of like terror. And that was it. Like, I think the next day I stopped eating meat because I couldn't in good conscience like go and order chicken from my favorite like Vietnamese spot, when I had those images like burned into my head. And I think it's so easy for a lot of people to just look at food as products as opposed to like lives that were like tortured and like so like I guess that's my roundabout way of connecting to the question that you asked me. But as far as like spirit animals or just animals that I really like, I really like ducks. I really like pangolins. Are you familiar with those?
No, I know what penguins are, but not pangolins.
Pangolin, yeah. Look it up. It's like it kind of looks like a different version of a armadillo, but they have these big, like kind of plate-like scales. It's
Oh
sort of,
yeah, yeah. Those are like
they're
those weird
very
Asian
rare.
armadillos.
Huh?
They're like those weird Asian armadillos.
Yeah, yeah. And they're like super like endangered because I think people think their scales have some kind of medicinal powers or something. So people are always like poaching them and shit, but they're really just weird, interesting animals. But yeah, I love dogs. Like I never had a dog growing up, but my wife had a dog, and then since then we've adopted like 2 other dogs. Um, dog. I don't know. I just like animals.
That's
I
awesome.
think one of the things too is the first time I did shrooms, you like really realize the individual like soul of all living creatures. Like you kind of feel this oneness with the universe, and so like to recognize animals as individuals in the same way that you do humans, I think when you've been kind of conditioned to think of them as something separate from us or something lesser your whole life, it's kind of a profound understanding.
Yeah, no, I was on shrooms and there was like this these fucking like little tiny bugs, and I was just like, I sprayed vinegar. I was like, the days before I was like spraying vinegar on them, and they're just like and then I'd be like, I didn't give a shit. But like on shrooms I was like, no, what have I done? Like I felt like a murderer.
Yeah.
It's like this innocent little bug, because I'm too afraid of like some little bug I have to like spray it a bunch, and it's like and just cause this innocent thing to like squeal and like fucking like want to die because
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. And it's like the same thing applies to like eating meat and stuff. I mean, I feel like part of the problem is just like the unethical slaughterhouses that are just torturing. I feel like there is like a difference between like some ethical killing and like versus just like
I mean,
pronging.
it really isn't though.
What is ethical killing? Like, I don't know, like giving them suppositories and stuff and like making them not suffer. But
I mean, I'm not going to get on a soapbox and preach about it, but I mean, I feel like that stuff is more just marketing to make the reality of it seem less bad, when ultimately it's the same thing. The conditions leading up to it might be slightly better or slightly worse, but a lot of times they're not even truthful. Like they'll say like grass-fed beef, and like that invokes some image of like a cow just wandering around in like this sun-drenched green pastures, just like living this carefree life on some range.
smoking weed.
Yeah, but I mean, realistically, they're just in some kind of pen, and it's just like probably the only difference between this designation and that designation is like it was a big enough corporation to pay for some type of certification. Maybe it was like one tiny percent like less horrific of a environment for them, but ultimately, like all you really have to do is just put yourself in that place. Like whether I'm nice to you for a couple of weeks before I chop your head off, or I'm a dick to you, like does it really matter? Like you just want to live,
No, I mean, I agree with like everything that you said. I just like in like an ideal world, there would be a way to like if like there's no other option because humans are going to consume them anyway, then to like make them not suffer at all, that would be ideal. And
I look at it too, like it's just too convenient for most people to not really have to interface with like the reality of what they consume, because it's just neatly packaged. It's kind of they put different names on it, like poultry and
It's like
you know
so horrible and sickening. Like every time I drive by a McDonald's, I'm like, who's even like eating that shit? Because it's like literally just like shit, and like every fast food is like chicken, and it's like really just like pisses me off. It's like I feel like, and part of it's like that whole like the whole culture of and like society is just marketing you animal products your whole life, and so it's just like, yeah, we eat animals, and it's totally not a problem. But as you
yeah,
said,
I mean, and it's like different cultures obviously have different standards and different ways of looking at that, and I try not to like um preach to people or be judgmental of people's like choices or whatever. But I think more than anything, I just want people to be a little more contemplative of those things, a little more considerate of what goes into, your burger or your steak or whatever. And if you can, I think it's just the lack of transparency in that whole process. Like I guarantee you, a good percentage of people, if they had to like watch those things or just be acutely aware of like all the horrors that happen leading up to, something ending up on your plate, they would at least think twice about it. They would at least have some kind of natural revulsion to, that. And I think in a larger capacity, it's like I don't think like your sense of morality or your ethics as far as how you relate to other people, like if you're against like sexism and you're against like racism and all kinds of things that are inequality in regular society, I think at some point you have to put that on the same spectrum as all living creatures. Like obviously, like if a mosquito lands on my arm, there's a good chance I'm going to swat it and kill it. Like nobody's perfect, and I'm not trying to like preach from an ivory tower or anything. But I think in circumstances where you can be a little bit more considerate and thoughtful about like the choices that you make, and the impact that they have on other living creatures, and even just environmentally, it's a worthwhile thing to kind of um, to take that into consideration and really take it seriously.
yeah, no, definitely. And I really appreciate that on your social media, Instagram, you're not afraid to post those videos of that are like hard to watch, where it's like, damn, like I'm like my throat, I feel it in my throat like right now from like the video you posted. So I really commend you for just like spreading awareness and using your platform to.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was my New Year's resolution a couple of years ago when I decided that I was going to go in that direction as far as having like a vegan diet or whatever. Vegan. I felt like I should kind of put that forward in the same way that it was presented to me. And it's not like to be preachy or to like make people feel guilty or anything like that. It's just awareness. Like if you're aware that something you're participating in causes suffering, like it kind of behooves you to think twice about like whether or not you want to continue doing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you also use your Instagram for to spread awareness about other stuff like riots and police brutality, also contrasting to like these hilarious comedic videos. So it's really just like, and there's like so many stories too. So uh, it's just really great what you're doing on Instagram.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so nearing the end here, because we've been going for a while and I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
What are your goals in the upcoming decade, and what impact and legacy do you want to leave behind?
Should I start with those, or is there more?
No, that's it. Just goals and
Um,
impact.
my goals is just kind of, I think, get successful enough with my creative endeavors where I can make a decent living and provide, for my family and stuff. Um, I would also like to, be able to carve out more time to pursue other avenues creatively, like making music, maybe sculpture. I like, building stuff, doing like woodworking and things like that. I would eventually even like to do more cooking. Um, maybe even like making clothes, something like that. Just all avenues of working with my hands and being creative. Just that's a sort of thing. I think more immediately, I want to finish my graphic novel project that I've been working on. That's like my number one thing for like the more current like future.
Cool.
And what was the second part of the question?
It was just your the legacy that you want to leave behind and impact.
I don't know. I guess I don't really think too much about that. I mean, I'm hoping that, within graffiti, I will have like carved out something unique and maybe influence people in a way that, they could point to me as, you know, something that inspired them or whatever. Like that's always something that's kind of heavy for me because I've had so many of those people that I've like looked up to and learned from and so on and so forth. So to be that for somebody else is quite an honor. Like when people say stuff like that, I think that's, I guess in terms of a legacy, that's all I can really ask for. I don't know. I think just being prolific, just keeping on like exploring different things and not stagnating or having to be pigeonholed into doing one thing forever. I mean, I luckily, or depending on how you want to look at unluckily, I've never had the option to be like pigeonholed into like I have to do this in order to be a successful artist, because I'm still trying to crack the code on how to be a successful artist in terms of like monetarily or whatever. But yeah, I just continue growing and just following my interests and my inspiration, just enjoy life, travel, meet interesting people, eat a lot of Thai food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I mean, I feel like you've already had such an incredible impact and career, and have like already like created a amazing like name for yourself in the graffiti world, at least for me, anyways.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Next one is just how do you think technology will impact the world and the art world? I don't know if you've been messing around with like Chat GPT or whatever with like this AI stuff. I was using it to like, it's pretty wild. Like you can just like say like code me a smart contract in this language, like factory contract, main contract, Oracle, and like whatever, and it'll just like zip you up the code, and then it'll just be like, oh, this isn't working right, and it's like bloop. And there's all this like hype in the news of just like, well, AI is gonna steal 98% of jobs in the next decade, including all of the artists. But I think at least graffiti, anyways, there's like a solid moat for a graffiti artist where it's like you're gonna need some really good AI to pick up, and a robot to even pick up a can.
Yeah, they'll need to figure out like a good way for like drones to be able to paint graffiti, and then they'll just tie that into the AI. But yeah, I don't know. Technology is like always a double-edged sword. I'm never like one of those people that wants to lament the fact that like technology moves forward. I mean, I think at a certain point it's going to be really scary, when you have these like those like Boston Dynamics like or those
Police
Raytheon
robots
jobs.
rolling out.
Yeah, like that shit's gonna be really scary just because obvious reasons, but I don't know. In a lot of ways, at least up until this point, before AI takes over everything, I think depending on how you use it, like technology has always kind of been a just another tool, to use. I haven't used the what is it,
GPT.
GPT. I haven't used that, but I have like dabbled with the AI like art generating things.
Yeah.
And as much as I really don't want my my job replaced by AI, it might happen because like it's so the thing that's so amazing about it is like it's really addictive just because depending on whatever random like prompts you put into it, like word wise, you can keep generating new images from the exact same prompt and it'll be different every time. And like when you're kind of riding this wave of just like churning out all these images, it's like you almost feel like I'm unlocking these images that have never existed before and I can make like 300 of them in 2 hours. Like for me to make a painting from start to finish, I usually have to spend at least like a week on it. And it's just to be able to make 300 things that I could see being like album covers in like 2 hours is like pretty insane, especially because you can just come up with the most absurd thing. And the thing that's really interesting about it is like the limitations of what it's capable of doing. Like you can kind of almost debug how the AI is generating the image. Like it has a really hard time dealing with hands and like text. It does these really odd things with where it just sees letters and words as like different shapes. And so it'll just kind of mash these like word looking shapes together, but it doesn't say anything. It's like an alien language. It's kind of loosely based on like Roman numerals, but I don't know. I like everything, like it can be a tool or it could be just like a crutch or something that's gonna like replace all our jobs. I mean, I guess if it's gonna kill artist jobs, I'll at least be glad if it's gonna like kill everyone's job at the same time. So hopefully we just have a lot more free time and we can just do this stuff for fun and not have to worry about paying our bills with it. But generally speaking, capitalism doesn't work that way. So we might just all be in like some Mad Max homeless shelter at some point. I don't know. I don't really even have an opinion on it. It's like no matter what I think, it's gonna go where it's gonna go. We have no control at this point, and I guess we just gotta hope for the best and use it for our own purposes and bettering our lives and hopefully not get too murdered by these Boston Dynamics like robot cop dogs or whatever.
Yeah, we're gonna be living in iRobot soon enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's really just wild. I mean I feel like it's at the stage now where it's like still like super primitive kindergarten level AI, but it's
Yeah.
like at the rate it's like going to like progress, it's like horrifying to think of like what the implications will be. Right now, I mean, I don't know what the AI you tried is called, if it was like Dolly or whatever, but the one I tried where it was like, oh, make this image from this. It was just like spawn me 4 images, and I did it multiple times, and each time was just like, this is just pure like unfiltered like chemical dog shit, and like no one would ever buy that. But like an
But what's
interesting,
interesting is though, like you do see like some of those Instagram feeds where like people are really good at it. Like when I first started seeing them popping up, I was like, damn, what the hell like TV show is this? Because I thought they were like still frames from some like science fiction thing or something. I would see all these wild, it almost look like kind of like futuristic, like weird Blade Runner-ish, but like there would be some weird Muppet ones and stuff. And I was like, what shows are these? And before I realized that it was all AI generated images, because this was, maybe even as soon as like 2 or 3 months ago when they first started popping up on like Instagram and stuff. So I'd be like saving all those because they just looked so eerie and like surreal. But I think like there definitely is some kind of based on the inputs that you put into it, you can guide it. And certain people are just way better at it than others. Like some of the ones I've made are just really bad, and other ones are just like accidentally really good and like creepy. Like I have this one saved on my phone. I don't know if you can see it. I was just trying. It's not good, but it's creepy and like just odd. But I've generated like hundreds of them just sitting on a toilet, like making stuff, and it gets really addictive. I kind of have to like force myself to stop doing it after a couple hours. Like the first day or two that I was doing it, I would just be like nonstop for like 2 or 3 hours straight, just making stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it is like really interesting. Like I read this like post like a day ago where it's just like and it'll get to like the point eventually where people will just be able to make like full on movies with it, like
I was thinking that.
But like we're like, I don't feel like we're anywhere near that yet. I mean, probably by that statement I mean like 5 years away, but like yeah, just not really close to like generating a scene. The AI that I played with was like really shitty at like generating just video from like nothing. But I mean, it'll probably get there sooner than we'd like.
Definitely. It definitely will.
Not great.
I think it'll be in like probably 3 or 4 years we'll start seeing it.
Yeah, it's just gonna be like all these other AI use cases like automating drive-throughs or whatever. Like the first AI McDonald's came. It wasn't fully AI because humans are still cooking the food, but it'll get there.
Yeah.
Like all these jobs, which just means like we're totally fucked.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I feel like we've already gone through like such a crazy. Well, how old are you?
25.
Okay, so I'm going to be 50 next year, or in a couple of months actually. But I mean, like, I've been on both sides of like the internet being like an integral part of people's daily life, And so I can kind of appreciate like how things were in graffiti before the internet and after, and sort of see the pros and cons of both. But I feel like this AI shit is going to be like next level crazy, and probably mostly bad crazy, but there'll be some good things that come out of it. But
yeah, I mean, that brings me back to like my shitty weed trip that I saw into the future, where we're just like literally like Matrix people living in pods, like getting drained for batteries or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
Oh god. Well, here. Last 2 questions and then we're almost done. Again, thanks for sticking with me so far.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to share my screen and examine some of your pieces so that everyone can see just how brilliant and like how much of a genius you are with your artwork and just how skilled and talented you are. And yeah, so I'd love to hear this story about this piece. I'm sure you know where it is. For the viewers watching it, it is apparently in Palestine. So who did you go with and how did that come about?
Yeah, it's kind of odd. I was just talking about this experience with my mom who's in town the other day, but yeah, this was on I think the border of Palestine and Israel. I went to Israel with this organization. I'm not going to say the name because for various reasons, but it was sort of pitched to us as this like cultural exchange thing where this guy was he was kind of loosely involved with graffiti and like youth culture stuff or whatever, and he wanted to bring these Americans over to share, like our art and, culture with them and vice versa. And so, because I like to travel and experience seeing these other things, it just seemed like, every other trip that I've had the opportunity to go and like learn about different places and whatever, experience that. And then over the course of this trip, which I think was around 3 weeks long, I went over there with Sever, and I think there's some other people like Utah and Ether were there. This guy Ski from New York. This guy Mike, I'm trying to remember what he writes. He was like Ski's boy. But, there was like I would say maybe 10 or 12 people on this trip, and we would just travel all over the country, paint different places, and kind of learn about Israel and stuff. But like halfway through, I wouldn't even say halfway through, it was kind of bits and pieces throughout, like just a little bit here, a little bit there, and then some things would just keep getting more and more extreme. But when we did this piece, it was like the wall that we painted is like these sections of these barriers between Israel and Palestine. And because I was not as knowledgeable about that whole conflict and the history and everything, I would have like probably liked to have known more when I was actually doing it. But anyways, we painted it, and like down this road that goes in front of it, there was some kind of military installation for like the Israeli army. And we had like this limited window of time to like paint this thing or whatever. So I was just trying to get this thing finished and whatever. We do the piece, and I was like super happy with it. And the guy that did the trip, he was doing a live blog for like this organization in our whole like 3-week trip. He would be every day blogging about our experiences and just showing photos and stuff we were doing. And I kept getting these little glimpses of like where this thing was kind of going off the rails instead of it just being this like lighthearted cultural exchange. And they were trying to like kind of indoctrinate us into like this like Zionist anti-Palestinian thing, but they wouldn't be really overt with it. They would just kind of say some little slick shit here and there. And we'd be like, what the fuck? Like it's just, it just like really rubbed me the wrong way. And the fact that I wasn't as knowledgeable about it then as I am now, like I think if I would have known more, I would have maybe said something or done something differently in the moment. But I remember when he posted this thing on the live blog thing, there was a guy that kept like kind of trolling, and he would comment on stuff and just talk shit about this organization and kind of like call us out for being affiliated with them. And at the time I was just like, who is this hater? Like, he doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I'm about. But in hindsight, the guy was pretty much right. Like that organization was like trying to, I don't know what even the goal of it was. It seemed like they were really trying to sell us on like Israel is 100% right and Palestine is just these like terrorists, and it was really fucked up. And when he posted this piece that I did, he said Ewok paints this dark, cavernous, wild style on the border of Israel and Palestine, and he said maybe this style is represents the dark hearts of our enemies or something like that, something like implying like, and I was, and at that point it went from just saying some little like kind of funny shit to like he's including me in my work in like his propaganda and his agenda. And I just had to call him out. I was like, yo, like don't use my shit for that, like that's not cool or whatever. And so I made him like take it down and stuff. But it got to the point where like a lot of the people that were on the trip from the United States, when we'd be traveling between the different cities, we would kind of like form our own little clique. So it was like a lot of the Americans, we would ride together, and then the dude that organized it and some of the Israelis and some of the other people that were involved, and it would drive in other cars, and we would just be talking mad shit about them the whole time because they kept just kind of doing this really fucked up, like racist kind of shit towards like Palestinians and stuff. And what's so silly is like, there's no like even rational basis for it. Like when you see a Palestinian and an Israeli standing next to one another, like you can't even tell the difference, like visually, culturally, like they look similar, but they're fighting over, well, realistically, like this was Palestine before it was Israel. This is all just like land that was ceded to them after World War II. And obviously, like Jewish people, post World War II needed somewhere to go, but it was really fucked up the way that it was done. And land that was occupied by people already was just kind of like taken from them by some other, like what was it, NATO or like the United States and like Great Britain, like just carved up like Palestine and like, here you go, like we're gonna just I don't know, it was messed up. But then like they have all these like justifications for why they deserve to have this land that they weren't previously occupying because of biblical scriptures and stuff like that. And I just have no patience for any kind of religious doctrine that justifies like oppressing people. It's super fucked up. I think if people that actually adhere to like the best influences of religion, that can be like a really positive thing. But for the most part, most people just use it to be selfish and to oppress people and to kind of, pick and choose which passages that, are convenient for their lifestyle or whatever. So anyways, long story short, that's kind of the story behind that piece.
That was a super wild story. I would have like never suspected that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. Like, just there's too much separation instead of unity between these religions, which just causes all these unnecessary conflicts. And despite somehow claiming to be like rooted in love, is this like comment at all accurate? Like, where there's like a picture of you posing with the corrupt military who gave you permission to paint. Oh, is that who you're talking about? Or that was like a different group than the military, I guess. But you also painted on the Israeli side and posed with their corrupt military who gave you permission to paint.
Yeah, that probably was. I remember like, because I think going into it at that point, we were all kind of naive to the real history of that. Like my understanding of the Israel-Palestine thing at that time was kind of just like this ongoing conflict for, 40 years or whatever it was. And, they were lobbing rockets back and forth. And, the way it's presented in our media is very biased in favor of, Zionist Israel or whatever. And I have no animosity towards any, race, religion, creed, whatever. But I think just when it comes to like how much politics are intertwined in that conflict and how much anti-Semitism gets injected into things where it's not having anything to do with hating Jewish people, it's just political opportunism that's being like they use like anti-Semitism as like a shield. In some cases there's justifiable animosity on both sides of that conflict, but the reality of it is it's such an asymmetrical conflict in terms of Palestine doesn't have the backing of the United States military. They don't get, billions of dollars yearly for defense. And it's just like a really one-sided thing. And given the history and the whole thing, like I met plenty of like really wonderful like Jewish people when I was over there, but I also saw some really ugly shit, just really some straight up racist, like bigoted stuff from some Israeli people. I mean, the thing about it is, I think the way that conflict in Israel is typically portrayed in the US media is very one-sided. And the reality of it is, it's like anywhere else. You know, we have crazy right-wing religious zealots here, and they have the same thing there. You know, we have progressive people here, and they have progressive people there. It's like every country, you know, like, but I feel like we get a very homogenized version of what that conflict is, and particularly as it pertains to like the Israeli component of it or whatever.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more with what you said. Just my observations on this piece is just like so beautiful. The textures and the letters and like just the flow of it all. The O that just looks like a spider almost, and like back when you said like there's like that crystal kind of influence there on like the K, I kind of see that shining through.
Yeah.
And like the clouds in the background, it's just overall just like so stunning to look at.
Wait, where's this image from? Is that from Instagram?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So next piece, I don't know do you know where you painted this one?
Yeah, that's in an alley in Hollywood. I can't remember what street it's off of, but that was I think that was part of the exchange project that Rhyme was doing. So
Oh yeah, I see the iron lock there.
Yeah, this particular piece, I think me and Pose painted next to one another, and I think we'd either sketched parts of each other's pieces, or maybe we'd even painted parts of each other's pieces, but it was kind of like a collaborative thing where we were both working on two pieces, but it was like a hybrid exchange type of project.
Okay, because in this piece too, this video looked like you painted Pose's name and he painted yours.
Yeah,
In
that was like
Korea.
the height of like that exchange project that Rhyme was doing.
Right. I mean, it's just another really awesome piece that I liked. And this one, do you know where this one is?
Yeah, that was somewhere in New York. I can't remember what borough it was. I think.
Nice.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I mean, again, it's like really funky and fun flow with the letters and like really creative use of color that I like. And just overall, it just leaves like a really good impression.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like, I like bits and pieces of these ones. I like some of the textural elements of it. Overall, I'm not crazy about a lot of these pieces, which is kind of where like the direction my later work has evolved more towards, like kind of more traditional like letter structure and stuff. But yeah, it's nice to see these. I haven't seen either one of these pieces for a while, but it's cool to see. Like, I kind of want to get back to doing more of this like textural type of work, or at least including it in what I'm doing currently.
Yeah. Well, one of my questions was like, how has your like creative process and like your process evolved over time from like this era to like where you are now? Like, here's another one where I'm just like when I saw this as like a kid, I was like, holy fuck, like what the hell am I even like looking at? This is like just so sick, you know?
Yeah, I was really happy with that when I finished. There's not a whole lot that I'm like, when I step back from it, I'm like not just focusing on things that I could have done better or messed up on, but you know, like looking at it now, I'm seeing a lot of like structural weaknesses and things in it. But I don't know. I think this was like a cool era just in terms of like creativity. You know, I think one of the, regarding your question, I think where I'm at now is I got to a point when I was like doing this era of work where it had a lot of textural elements and stuff to it. And I kind of felt like Right. I remember I was looking at, like spray can art or subway art, and it really blew my mind that some of these pieces that like these teenagers did, 20, 25, 30 years ago or longer, or actually longer than that, like 40, 45 years ago, like stuff that like a 14, 16-year-old kid did in like a subway, like in a subway tunnel in the dark, having sneaked out from their parents' house, running around the city all hours of the night. Like they made the foundation of this art form that everyone's been influenced from since then. And the work still holds up. You know what I mean? Like the longevity of a lot of the subway pieces from that era is just so mind-boggling to me that something a teenager could create could have like resonance, 45 years later and still be good. Like none of those forms really existed. Like there was sign painter script and block letters and bubble letters and stuff, but like a lot of the nuances and like isms of that era of style, the classic like New York subway graffiti, that was all original stuff. And the strength of it and the endurance of like just looking at those books still, like 75, 80%, 85% of those pieces are still hold up today. Whereas I was looking at some of my work from, maybe 10 years earlier, 20 years earlier or whatever, and some of it just sucked. Like there was always like something redeeming about it that I liked and appreciated and learned from and kind of was able to build off of, but I didn't feel like I was making any stuff that would stand the test of time or be like classic, in the same way that these these kids were doing back in the 80s. So that's when I kind of really scaled back because I felt like I was leaning too hard on special effects and textures and kind of things that were eye candy for people. But the essence of what I was really trying to do was good letters, like all of the bells and whistles and like special effects is just garnish. I would much rather have been doing more solid letter structures with these elements added to it as like a secondary layer, as opposed to like leaning too much on that as like the actual structural elements of the piece, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. I mean, I don't feel like if you're talking about like this piece being like more structural and like more, I guess, like complex. I mean, I think this one, like this E, for instance, is just like really creative and flows very nicely. I don't know what you would want to like change about it and like direct your focus towards, but
I think the biggest thing that bugs me about this just structurally is like there's that huge space where that teal color is in between the E and the W.
oh, okay.
Like I feel like I should have, like, in hindsight, I should have leaned that W more into that space rather than just filling it with something. And I felt like maybe a lot of what I was doing that was kind of like a crutch was like I knew I could paint these like this eye candy and these techniques. So instead of like on the front end having like a really rock solid like outline and letter structure, I could kind of just like wing it on the letter. I would still like come up with like cool letters, but the way they interacted with one another, like that big gap between the E and the W, is something that like jumps out at me right away now that like I didn't really see then because I was just filling the space with with stuff, and I thought that was kind of a crutch. So I stripped everything down to just the essence of like the letter structure. And the plan was I was gonna come back to this type of work, but with better letter structure. And
Right.
I haven't done that yet, Like I think I still have the ability to kind of paint like this, but I sort of have to relearn a couple things, and it also, one of the things that's really difficult in my master plan was painting a piece like this. The process is much different than painting what I would consider to be a better letter structure, like more traditional letter structure piece. It would almost be like coming up with structure and having that really solid, and then figuring out a way to kind of sprinkle these elements into it. But the process, the way I arrive at it, is much different than how I painted these ones. Yeah, I mean, I'm always super critical of my work, but I do give myself credit for the things that I think I did that were kind of unique or interesting or whatever. Like that black and white one, I was using a lot of those
Oh, I was just gonna pull it up next. Yeah, it's interesting to hear your views on your own artwork.
I think the strongest part of this piece, in addition to just I like the limited color palette.
Where was this painted?
This was in Miami in Wynwood, like during Art Basel.
Right, cool.
I think I had some interesting concepts I was dealing with. Like I was kind of doing these wireframe outlines for sections of the pieces. Like you can kind of see it particularly in the E and the W. Like instead of just a whole solid block that was filled in, I would kind of just make the outline and then have a lot of the background showing through it, but you could kind of still see how it was outlined, or I would only fill in sections of it. And I was just playing with some kind of conceptual things. I think ultimately these are not great letters, but they were painted in a cool way. And I was really getting experimental by using those bug sprayers with they're kind of like the crink sprayer type things, but these were just the ones I would get from the garden center at Home Depot or whatever, and put watered down house paint in them. So I was using those as another tool along with the spray paint, where I would kind of make these really spitty, it was almost like you were just magnifying the spray of a spray can, but doing it these much bigger dot patterns and spray. It's kind of just magnified 10, or 300% on the wall. And one of the things I really enjoyed about the process of doing these two was, if you had a buffed wall, let's say you had a wall that was all black or whatever, if you had one of these bug sprayers with some watered down latex paint, white, you could kind of just do a really quick gestural sketch of your letter shape, just to kind of get the feel of it, similar to how you would do if you're in figure drawing, you'll do a quick charcoal, it's kind of just getting the structure and the angles and the proportions and stuff right. So you could kind of do that, and then you can go back in and carve it up with the spray paint and make hard lines or whatever. There's just a lot of elements to play with as far as textures and fades and stuff like that. So I would actually like to paint this more now with kind of better letters, I think.
Yeah, no, that's it's like you're able to build a really cool background with all this interesting texture and fades, and it reminds me almost of the water-based paint a little bit.
Yeah, I did some stuff in the studio where it kind of looked like that with the water-based paint.
Yeah, no, overall, I mean, it's just a really sick piece. I mean, most graffiti I look at does not come close to being as interesting or captivating as this. It's just a really sick,
Thanks.
super creative. This one is kind of another black and white one where it's just blew me away when I saw it.
Yeah, again, I mean, I think I have the same criticisms. I feel the letter structures is pretty mediocre. But overall, it kind of has a cool look to it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the K is a little bit disproportional to the giant W, but other than that, I don't think it's too bad. In my view, at least. But I don't know what you're thinking. And again, you use these little crystally, this crystal pattern is that kind of what you're trying to describe earlier in the
yeah. I don't think that's one of the better ones I've done, but yeah. like on that Miami one that I was talking about, where I was complaining about the space between the E and the W.
Yeah.
On the O, yeah, like that one, like those crystals on the O were pretty good. I was like really happy with how that turned out.
Yeah, no, because it's not easy to paint. I don't know what the dimensions of that are, but it's probably, I imagine, I don't know. Are you using like like anything to block and like stop it from spraying, like piece of cardboard or anything?
No, everything was freehand.
Jeez.
It's just a
Crazy.
lot of cutbacks and strategically like putting the colors down in the right order.
Yeah. Sweet. Maybe you could just, I mean, we're almost done. We've been going for like so long, but any thoughts on GK or Tyke that you want to share? Because I was just looking at their pieces earlier and they're really sweet.
I mean, there's not a lot I can say that hasn't been said about both those dudes, but yeah, they're just big influences early on in my graffiti. Tyke stylistically, and just the insane stories I would hear about GK when I was coming up. How he had just totally murdered LA with bombing and pieces and freeway spots and everything. Like he had such a larger than life persona just from his work, and I had never met him at this point. But like one of the interesting things about graffiti is like when you know about somebody by seeing their work before you actually get to meet them, you kind of form this like mental image of who you think the person is. And just from seeing his graffiti, I was like, damn, GK is probably this like huge, like 6'4", like scary ass cholo dude or whatever. And the first time I met him, I came out here for Bless's wedding, and I think I was kicking it with Saber. He was like giving me the tour of LA because it was my first time out here, and he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna go meet up with GK at this spot before we go to this gallery show." And he shows up. He drives up in like like a mom kind of grocery getter, like station wagon with wood, like that fake wood paneling on the side from like those kind of 80s cars. It was almost like the car that was in National Lampoon's Vacation, like that type of like just
Station
grocery
wagon.
getter. He pulls up in that. He's wearing a suit. He's got like a very like kind of Republican looking like clean like haircut, and he's just this tiny like skinny white dude, and like he was like the polar opposite of the mental image I had assembled from just seeing his work for the last like 5 years or whatever. And he was just like totally different. And I remember, like, I've told this story before, but like my mind was already blown that like this person that was like wearing a suit, because I think he had come from something where he had to dress up or whatever. But it was just such a random way to like meet GK for the first time. And I was still like kind of fanning out because this was like a professional like LA vandal, and I'm coming from the Midwest, just got randomly put in this crew, and I'm like super starstruck. And he was just like super cool, super outgoing. And I remember he bought me a chocolate shake from, I don't know, it was like In-N-Out Burger or something. And it was just like one of the coolest stories of like meeting one of your like graffiti heroes I can think of, because it was so random and so weird. But yeah, he's a champion. Like the work that he put in, and just everything, and just the fact that he's just like a really down to earth, funny, cool guy. Like, yeah, I have a lot of respect for GK and Tyke. Like Tyke's one of my good friends out here. I see him probably the most out of people in the crew, just because we live relatively close to one another. So we end up watching a lot of UFC fights and just hanging out with the kids and stuff together. But I helped him move into his new house a couple of weeks ago.
That's awesome. CK still painting and doing stuff?
Yeah, he's still doing his thing. I know he like yeah, he has like a regular 9 to 5, but he still gets out. I see him do stuff here and there. I'm sure he's doing a lot that I don't see.
That's dope.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to thank you so much for your time. I have one last kind of fun question to end it, and then get on rolling. But I saw that you posted on your Instagram that you retired and had to say goodbye to your beloved Volvo XC70 wagon. So what do you drive now, and what are your best memories in that Volvo?
Well, my entire adult life, I've only had Volvos, so I'm very dedicated to that brand.
Why? Why Volvo?
I think it was just my parents had them when I was growing up, and then when I was in school, my parents sold me their Volvo when they got a new car, and by sold I mean I think I paid them probably $200 and was always broke, and they were just like, all right, well, just have it. But yeah, I don't know. I really like them because I think they're super timeless. Like even the old kind of clunky boxy ones were still kind of like low key dope looking. It's sort of like it's like the most low key kind of luxury vehicle, like they don't have like that overt like douchebag prestige of like a BMW or like a Mercedes or an Audi. They're kind of like they've always been a
Gustavo Friedman from Breaking Bad that you met drove one in Breaking Bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's more low key. Like I like it. It's a subtle kind of classiness to it, but I don't know. That's like one of my things. If I ever come into a lot of money, I like the idea of like just customizing out like cars and stuff. So I want to just get a bunch of old Volvos and put like, really crazy like engines and stuff in them, and just, like maybe some matte finish, like powder coated paint or something, or like it's like crazy rims or something on them. But yeah, I don't know. I just have a thing for Volvos. Like that's all I've ever driven. And that XE, what was the one you can't remember?
XC70.
Yeah, that station wagon. I bought that for, I think it was like $4,000 when I moved out to Boston a couple of years ago. And it kind of drove shitty, but it was only like $4,000. I mean, I really liked the car. Like the interior was immaculate. It was like really nice. There's something weird with the steering column. I think it was just that one was kind of messed up. So it was hard to turn the steering wheel, but I think it was probably just something, if I would have put some money into it, I could have fixed. But because I only planned on really having that while I was living out there, I wasn't trying to sink a bunch of money into it. But the probably the most major memory I have with that car was the fact that when I got a job out there, I was working at Reebok, and because they paid to have me relocated out there, they put me up in like an apartment for I think like a month, to give me time to kind of look for a permanent place. But the rental market out there really sucks because there's so many colleges and universities, and everything is super overpriced. And to get anything that's like decent and affordable is like a miracle. So I like couldn't find a place for a long time, and they extended my I couldn't stay in that initial place that they put me in, but they put me up in a hotel for like 2 or 3 weeks, hoping that I could find a place, and I just couldn't find one. And I remember I went on a work trip. I think we went to like Paris and like Dublin, and I knew that like my hotel was finished, like the amount of time they allotted me for my residency or whatever was up by the time I got back. So basically, before I left for the trip, I packed up all my clothes and everything I had out there, and I had it in these 2 big Tupperware bins in the back of my car. And after coming back from like Dublin and Paris on this like work trip, I was like officially homeless. So I was living in my car for like 3 weeks in the middle of winter, and I would basically I would work super late at work. Like after I was done with doing like my regular job, I would just kind of sit at my desk and do like my own stuff, or like make 7th letter t-shirt designs and stuff. And I would just stay there as long as they would let me. Like occasionally there would be like a security guard that would eventually kick you out at like 10:30 or 11. Sometimes you could stay a little later or whatever. And then I would just go up to the parking ramp and just unroll my sleeping bag and sleep in the back of that. I'd fold down the seats and just sleep in my car. I did that for like 3 weeks, and it was kind of awesome. It was sort of like the romantic version of like running away from home when you're a kid and just like living on your own and doing some like sketchy off the grid type of thing. But it also kind of sucked too, because like you had to take a shit in the middle of the night. Like you'd have to navigate, like get all that stuff taken care of until you can go back to work the next morning and stuff. And yeah, it was a little bit brutal, but I have like really good memories of that car.
Yeah, that's dope. I mean, I wouldn't have suspected that your favorite memory would be being homeless in the car, but I mean, that speaks to how great Volvos are. I mean, you got the wagon, so it's at least comfortable.
Yeah.
Stuff. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to Pimp My Ride Volvo edition with Ewok.
Yeah, I'll document it if I ever get there.
So, well, can't thank you enough for coming on here and being the first guest. Really means a lot.
Yeah,
And
for sure, man.
yeah, huge thanks. Amazing conversation. I really appreciate it. It was great speaking with you. And yeah, that's all I got to say. So
All right,
thanks
then.
for watching, everyone. I hope this blows up and gets a bunch of views.
Hell yeah. All right, thanks, man. Have a
Do you
good
have
night.
anything to plug right now?
I guess this is kind of long term, but just keep your eyes out for my graphic novel. I won't say the title because I'm kind of superstitious about talking about stuff before it's official, but I would say it's probably another year or a year and a half away from being completed. But I have a graphic novel kind of comic project that I'm hoping will be pretty cool. I have confidence that it'll be good. So I guess keep your eyes out for that. I'll probably end up doing like some kind of Kickstarter or fundraising thing before I get it published or whatever, leading up to that. But that's probably at least like another year or so away. But yeah, other than that, feel free to follow my Instagram and my stories. There's some interesting stuff in there from time to time.
Instagram, everyone. Ewok MSKHM. So
yeah. Yeah, man.
Appreciate it.
All right, then. Thank you, bro. Have a good night.